Decades ago, the world suddenly changed. Strange mutations appeared across the planet, and terrifying ghost monsters invaded every corner of the world. Humanity entered what became known as the mythical era, where survival itself became a daily struggle. As countless ghost monsters attacked cities, people had no choice but to fight back. During this time, humans discovered that they could awaken special professions. Some became swordsmen, mages, archers, priests, or other powerful classes. Along with these professions came unique skills, and by raising their ranks they could continue becoming stronger. The awakened warriors fought fiercely against the ghost monsters on the blue planet. Through endless battles and sacrifices, they slowly carved out safe places where humanity could survive. This age became known as the era of awakened professionals. In the Longsha Federation, at Haicheng High School, the annual awakening ceremony was about to begin. All the students gathered as the instructors prepared the ceremony. The combat class instructor Lu Hu announced that the awakening ceremony had officially started. He explained that this day would determine every student's future, because the profession they awakened would shape the rest of their lives. Lu Hu encouraged the students to stay confident, and wished that every one of them would awaken the profession they had always hoped for. The main character, Fang Zhou, looked at the awakening ceremony with a calm smile. After transmigrating to this world many years ago, the day he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Today he would awaken his profession. The instructor called out Fang Zhou's name and asked him to step forward. Fang Zhou immediately answered and calmly walked toward the awakening platform. As he walked, many students watched him with curiosity. Some wondered what profession he would awaken. A few girls guessed that he would become a priest because his gentle appearance suited the class. They even said it would be a waste if someone as handsome as him became anything else. Not everyone agreed. Some students argued that good looks meant nothing in this world. They believed an awakened person's profession was the only thing that truly mattered. Others laughed and said those students were simply jealous of Fang Zhou's appearance. Meanwhile, instructor Lu Hu looked through Fang Zhou's records. He noted that Fang Zhou was an orphan whose parents had died as martyrs. Despite his background, Fang Zhou had excellent physical fitness and outstanding academic grades. Seeing his impressive record, Lu Hu understood why so many people were paying attention to him. Without saying a word, Fang Zhou stepped onto the awakening platform. He calmly stretched out his hand and placed it on the awakening stone, waiting for his profession to be revealed. As soon as Fang Zhou touched the awakening stone, his expression suddenly changed. The awakening platform released an enormous burst of golden light that shot high into the sky. Everyone watching was left speechless. They had never seen such a powerful reaction during an awakening ceremony. Many students were shocked and wondered if Fang Zhou was about to awaken an unbelievably powerful profession. Some even shouted that it was exactly what they expected from their idol. The next moment, dark green energy suddenly poured out from Fang Zhou's body. It spread rapidly across the sky, covering the area with an eerie aura. Instructor Lu Hu stared at the strange phenomenon in disbelief. He realized that Fang Zhou's awakening had triggered a rare heavenly and earthly phenomenon. Lu Hu could not help wondering what incredible profession Fang Zhou had awakened. As the green energy continued to spread, a terrifying vision appeared in the sky. Countless undead creatures, skeleton warriors, ghostly spirits, and enormous monsters emerged from the darkness, as if an army from the underworld had answered Fang Zhou's awakening. As the strange vision continued, Fang Zhou found himself surrounded by countless undead beings. Skeleton warriors, ghostly mages, death knights, and terrifying monsters all seemed to acknowledge his presence. Dark energy swirled around him as if he were their ruler. The green aura grew even stronger, spreading across the sky, before finally settling down. A glowing notification then appeared before Fang Zhou, announcing that his awakening was complete. His profession had been successfully awakened as a necromancer. Fang Zhou looked at the message in surprise. He quietly repeated the name to himself and wondered if this was really his awakened profession. As the strange phenomenon disappeared, the crowd fell silent for a brief moment. Then, several students suddenly burst into laughter. They mocked Fang Zhou, saying that he had caused such a huge commotion only to awaken as a necromancer. Although the class was considered rare, they claimed it was one of the weakest combat professions. In their eyes, it had almost no future compared to other classes. The students continued laughing and said it was proof that academic excellence did not determine how strong a person's profession would be. But Fang Zhou remained calm despite everyone's ridicule. He knew that although necromancers appeared powerful, they had one fatal weakness. Their strength depended on having a close connection with the undead realm. The problem was that life and death naturally opposed each other. As living humans, almost no one could truly understand or connect with the undead realm. Because of that, most necromancers could never bring out the full power of their class. However, Fang Zhou was different. He opened his status panel and looked at his information. It showed that his name was Fang Zhou, his profession was Necromancer, his rank was Lower Apprentice, and his basic attributes were Strength 1, Constitution 1, Agility 1, and Spirit 2. Fang Zhou clenched his fist and quietly smiled. At that moment, a mysterious green notification suddenly appeared before him. It congratulated him for awakening the Undead Realm Experience System. Seeing the message, Fang Zhou became excited. He had finally received the special system he had waited 18 long years for. Looking at the glowing green orb floating before him, he realized that his greatest advantage had finally arrived. The system explained that Fang Zhou had unlocked the Undead Realm Experience System. It had automatically connected him to the Undead Realm and created an undead clone for him. Through this skeleton clone, Fang Zhou could explore the Undead Realm, devour other undead creatures, and level up to become stronger. The skeleton clone could also be summoned into the real world, but the system warned him that this experience carried unknown risks. Fang Zhou quickly understood how useful the system was. To a necromancer, being able to personally experience the undead realm was almost perfect. He smiled and immediately summoned his undead clone. A powerful skeleton clone appeared before him. Fang Zhou realized that this skeleton was his other body in the undead realm. The system explained that before summoning it into reality, he could briefly possess the clone and experience the undead realm through it. The system also told him that the skeleton clone could devour other undead creatures to increase its own attributes. Any undead creatures killed by the clone could also be summoned by Fang Zhou to fight in the real world. Hearing this, Fang Zhou became even more excited. As long as he killed enough undead creatures, he would have an endless supply of summons. From that moment on, the entire undead realm became his hunting ground. Fang Zhou decided that he would explore the undead realm another time. For now, he wanted to see his clone in the real world. He immediately ordered the system to summon the skeleton clone. The system accepted his command and began the summoning process. A large green magic circle appeared beneath them, and moments later, the skeleton clone stepped out into the real world. Fang Zhou carefully looked at the skeleton. He realized that this clone could be summoned directly whenever he wanted, making it his strongest summon at the moment. Meanwhile, the examiner called for the next student, Bai Xiaochan, to step forward for the awakening ceremony. As he looked at Fang Zhou, he could not help but sigh. He felt that Fang Zhou had great talent, but it was a shame that someone with such potential had awakened the necromancer profession. Some girls walked over to comfort Fang Zhou and told him not to feel discouraged. They believed that even as a necromancer, he could still achieve a legendary crown. They also admired the skeleton he had summoned, saying it looked very cool. Seeing this, the jealous boys became angry. They could not understand why girls still surrounded Fang Zhou even after he awakened such a weak profession. One of them complained that Fang Zhou was only getting attention because he was handsome. The blonde student felt especially annoyed. He believed Fang Zhou's skeleton summon was nothing impressive compared to his assassin profession. He suddenly remembered that novice necromancers could only summon a few skeletons a year. He thought that if he destroyed Fang Zhou's skeleton now, Fang Zhou's leveling speed would be greatly slowed down. With that thought, he secretly activated his skill. Silent Sleeve Arrow. A hidden arrow shot from his sleeve toward the skeleton clone. However, the skeleton clone immediately sensed the attack. It moved and disappeared from its place, dodging the hidden arrow. Fang Zhou, who had also seen the hidden arrow, remained calm. The blonde assassin was shocked when he realized the skeleton had disappeared. Before he could react, the skeleton clone instantly appeared behind him at incredible speed. In the next moment, the skeleton clone struck him across the face with a powerful mace, sending blood flying from his mouth and smashing him to the ground with tremendous force. The blonde student crashed onto the grass, covered in bruises and bleeding. He stared at the skeleton in disbelief, unable to understand how such a thing was possible. He had never imagined that a necromancer's skeleton could move so fast or possess such overwhelming strength. The blonde student slowly struggled to his feet, while holding his injured face. Looking at Fang Zhou, he angrily demanded to know what he was trying to do. Although he had been badly beaten, he still could not accept what had happened. He cursed under his breath, wondering how Fang Zhou's skeleton could even sense and stop a surprise attack launched from a blind spot. However, He quickly convinced himself that Fang Zhou was only a skeleton mage. No matter how powerful his summoned skeleton was, he believed Fang Zhou's real body had to be weak. With that thought, the blonde student suddenly rushed straight toward Fang Zhou. He stretched out his hand and shot another hidden arrow, determined to kill him before the skeleton could interfere. However, Fang Zhou calmly caught his attacking arm before the blade could touch him. Then he pulled the blonde student to his side with full speed while gathering energy in his hand. Fang Zhou looked at him with a cold smile and said that he had greatly overestimated his own abilities. The next moment, Fang Zhou threw a powerful punch. Wrapped in crackling energy, his fist slammed into the blonde student's body with tremendous force. The impact sent the attacker flying through the air before he crashed heavily onto the ground. Blood spilled from his mouth as he rolled across the grass. The surrounding students were left speechless. They stared in disbelief after watching Fang Zhou defeat Lu Renjia with nothing more than a single punch. Lu Renjia crashed to the ground, coughing up blood. His body was covered in injuries, and he could barely move after taking Fang Zhou's punch. Fang Zhou glanced at him with a bored expression. He said the fight was too boring and turned around to leave, with his skeleton summon following behind him. Just then, Teacher Lucy arrived, after hearing the commotion, and asked what had happened. The nearby students quickly explained that Lu Renjia had tried to launch a sneak attack on Fang Zhou, but Fang Zhou had defeated him instantly with a single punch. They were shocked because everyone believed a necromancer's main body was weak, yet Lu Renjia had not been able to defeat Fang Zhou at all. Hearing everyone praise Fang Zhou made Lu Renjia even more furious. Supported by his classmates, he glared at Fang Zhou with hatred. Before leaving, Lu Renjia shouted that Fang Zhou should just wait because he would take revenge one day. Fang Zhou ignored the threat completely and calmly walked away as the crowd continued talking about the unbelievable battle. After leaving the arena, Fang Zhou returned to a quiet place where no one would disturb him. Standing beside his powerful skeleton, he called out to the system. He decided it was finally time to experience the undead realm. The system immediately appeared and asked whether he wanted to begin the undead realm experience. Fang Zhou knew that entering the undead realm would help him understand that mysterious world much better. Since it was a mandatory training course for necromancers, he had to enter sooner or later. He also knew that if luck was on his side, he could devour other undead creatures there. There was no better way for a necromancer to increase his strength. Even so, Fang Zhou understood that the journey would not be easy. The undead realm was filled with extremely dangerous creatures, and no one could predict who would become the hunter and who would become the prey. In that place, risks and rewards always existed together. After making up his mind, Fang Zhou ordered the system to start the undead realm experience. The system acknowledged his request and asked him to wait while it made the necessary preparations. Fang Zhou smiled to himself. He had waited 18 years for this system, and there was no way he would waste such a valuable opportunity to become stronger. A few moments later, the system announced that the preparations were complete. It warned him that the undead realm experience carried an unknown level of danger and asked him one last time whether he wished to proceed. Without any hesitation, Fang Zhou calmly chose to confirm. As soon as he confirmed his decision, a dark green portal surrounded him. In the next instant, he was transported into the mysterious undead realm. When he opened his eyes, he found himself standing in a lifeless world beneath a blood-red sky. The land was covered with broken rocks, skulls, dead trees, and graves. Everything around him was silent and filled with the aura of death. In the middle of that place, Fang Zhou had turned into a skeleton that looked exactly like the one he had summoned before. Looking at his body, he wondered if this was the undead realm experience. Curious, he checked his information. The skeleton was only an apprentice-rank clone with very low attributes. However, it possessed an innate ability called skeletal armament. This skill allowed skeletons to use bones to strengthen themselves and forge weapons and equipment. Fang Zhou quickly realized that this was the same ability his summoned skeleton had used during the previous battle. He immediately understood how valuable this skill was. To improve his chances of survival, Fang Zhou decided that the skeleton should forge a weapon before facing any enemies. However, before it could begin, loud growls echoed through the area. Several fierce wolves with glowing red eyes suddenly appeared from the darkness and charged straight toward him, ready to tear him apart. The two wolves attacked Fang Zhou almost the moment they appeared. Their speed caught him completely by surprise. Watching through the skeleton's eyes, Fang Zhou immediately realized that the undead realm was far more dangerous than he had expected. Hidden threats could appear at any time without warning. Suddenly, a skeleton hand came out of the ground and grabbed Fang Zhou's leg. Before he could understand what was happening, a two-headed wolf attacked him. Fang Zhou panicked a little after seeing that one of his legs had become tangled, making it difficult to move. Thinking quickly, Fang Zhou used all his strength and pulled out the skeleton that was grabbing his leg from the ground. As the two-headed wolf jumped to attack him, he threw that skeleton at the wolf. The skeleton hit the two-headed wolf with a solid impact, but the attack had almost no effect, and only the skeleton was destroyed. Seeing that, Fang Zhou immediately realized that controlling the skeleton's body in real combat was much harder than he had expected. The two-headed wolf kept attacking from different directions, giving Fang Zhou almost no chance to fight back. Fang Zhou knew the battle could not continue like this, or he would eventually lose. While dodging its attacks, he suddenly noticed a pile of scattered bones lying nearby. An idea immediately came to Fang Zhou's mind. The two-headed wolf charged forward once again with its jaws wide open, ready to tear Fang Zhou apart. Instead of retreating, Fang Zhou calmly raised his hand and activated his innate skill, skeletal armament. At once, the scattered bones on the ground began to gather and turned into a bone axe. Without hesitation, he charged at one of the wolves and swung his newly forged weapon with full force, shouting for it to die. The powerful slash struck one of the wolf's heads and sent it flying backward. The wounded wolf's second head quickly regained its balance and lunged at Fang Zhou again, biting his hand. At that moment, Fang Zhou in the real world suddenly felt a sharp pain in his own arm. Seeing that, Fang Zhou frowned and realized that every injury the skeleton received inside the undead realm was also transferred to his real body. This discovery made him understand that the system was far more dangerous than he had first imagined. Even so, Fang Zhou remained calm. Looking at the dead head of that wolf, he said that since this head was already dead, it should serve him. Saying that, he grabbed the dead wolf's head and pulled it out of the wolf's body along with its skeleton. Fang Zhou's blue soul fire burned even brighter as he raised that wolf's skeleton and activated its innate skill, skeletal armament. Once again, bones gathered together and quickly formed a long bone whip with a wolf skull attached to its end. Gripping the weapon tightly, Fang Zhou swung it with incredible speed. The bone whip spun through the air like a storm. It struck the remaining wolf head across the body, tearing open a deep wound. Fang Zhou controlled the whip with surprising precision, changing its direction in mid-air and launching another powerful strike. Every attack became faster and more accurate as he continued attacking, and finally he killed it. Exhausted, he then sat quietly among the bodies of the fallen wolves, breathing heavily after the fierce battle. Looking at the destroyed battlefield, he realized that skeletal armament was even more useful than he had expected. He understood that the system had granted him a truly powerful skill. Just then, a strange blue flame suddenly rose from one of the dead wolves and floated into the air. Fang Zhou noticed it immediately and stared at it in confusion, wondering what it was. As the blue flame drifted closer, Fang Zhou suddenly felt an intense hunger growing inside his body. The feeling became stronger with every passing second, making it difficult to ignore. Then a strange instinct took over. A voice deep inside urged Fang Zhou to devour the blue flame, absorb its power, and evolve into something even stronger. Blue energy began to surge around Fang Zhou as he instinctively reached out toward the mysterious flame. He opened his mouth and swallowed the blue soul flame without hesitation. The moment he absorbed the flame, a green system screen appeared before his eyes, announcing that one of his attributes had been upgraded. He quickly checked his status and saw that his strength had increased from 1.0 to 1.1. Fang Zhou realized that this increase was most likely the effect of his skeletal armament skill. At the same time, the system displayed a new stat called Soul Power, which had increased to 0.1. Curious, he wondered what soul power could be used for. The system immediately explained that soul power was converted from soul energy and had many uses. It could help deduce new skills, increase a person's potential, and enhance equipment. After reading the explanation, Fang Zhou finally understood the true purpose of soul power. To gain more of it, there was only one path ahead. He had to continue exploring the world, hunt down his enemies, devour their souls, and keep evolving into a stronger undead being. Fang Zhou realized that as long as he kept hunting and devouring stronger enemies, he could continue growing without limits. His future strength would have no ceiling. While he was thinking, he noticed another skeleton approaching from the distance. Curious, he used the system to inspect the creature. The system identified it as a basic skeleton summoned by a Necromancer. It was only an apprentice-level undead with a weak body and no intelligence. Its greatest weakness was the blue soul fire burning inside its skull. Seeing this, Feng Zhou immediately activated skeletal armament. Using the skill, he forged a sharp bone spear, and the system confirmed that the weapon had been successfully created. Without wasting any time, Feng Zhou charged straight toward the enemy. As he killed that skeleton and devoured its blue flame, the system rewarded him with another increase, raising his agility by 0.1 and his soul power by 0.1. Feng Zhou continued defeating every enemy that stood in his way and devoured their blue flames. With each skeleton he killed, the system rewarded him with more constitution and soul power, making him steadily stronger. As his power increased, his armor became more complete, and his body grew even more imposing. However, after checking his current attributes, Feng Zhou realized he was still far from his goal. Even though his strength had increased greatly, he believed he could become much stronger. At that moment, back in the real world at Haicheng High School, while Feng Zhou's consciousness was in the undead world, his body stood quietly, and he kept repeating to himself that he could become even stronger. Just then, a female classmate walked over and called out to him. Hearing her voice, Feng Zhou snapped out of the undead world and turned toward her in surprise as she called his name once again. Feng Zhou was surprised to see Bai Xiaochen standing in front of him. He asked why she was there, but before he could say anything else, Bai Xiaochen noticed the blood on his hand and became worried. She assumed that Feng Zhou had hurt himself because he was upset about awakening an ordinary profession. She quickly told him that no matter how disappointed he was with his awakened class, he should never hurt himself just to vent his frustration. Feng Zhou looked at her in confusion. He soon realized that she had completely misunderstood the situation. The blood on his hand came from his battle in the undead realm, not from self-harm. Silently, he decided that the next time he entered the undead realm, he should find a quieter place where no one could interrupt him. Not wanting to explain everything, Feng Zhou calmly told Bai Xiaochen that he was fine and that the injury was only a small scratch. Bai Xiaochen looked at him with concern and asked if he was really okay. Feng Zhou smiled slightly and reassured her once again that he was perfectly fine. After that, he reminded Bai Xiaochen that meditation class was about to begin and that they should hurry back to the classroom. Bai Xiaochen nodded in agreement, and the two of them walked back to class together. As Feng Zhou and Bai Xiaochen walked back toward the classroom, Feng Zhou suddenly coughed up blood and covered his mouth. Blood stained his hand, making Bai Xiaochen even more worried. She immediately insisted on taking him to the infirmary, because she no longer believed that he was only slightly injured. Feng Zhou calmly assured her that he was fine. At that moment, the system also warned him that he had spent too much time in the undead realm, and reminded him to pay attention to his physical condition. Seeing that, he finally realized that staying in the undead realm for too long placed a heavy burden on his body. Just then, Feng Zhou noticed something unexpected. When he checked his status, he discovered that his own attributes had increased along with those of his summoned skeleton. His strength, agility, constitution, and spirit had all improved. His attention then shifted to a newly unlocked ability called Deducible Skill. Feng Zhou became excited as he studied the new skill. He wondered if it meant he could become like the top awakened experts. If the skill truly worked the way he imagined, then he might even be able to create completely new skills of his own. At Haicheng High School's teaching building, the students gathered for their meditation class. Once everyone was seated, the instructor introduced herself as Shen Hongyu, the teacher in charge of the meditation class, and a silver lower fire mage. Shen Hongyu then handed each student a basic meditation manual that matched their awakened profession. She explained that they needed to use meditation to awaken and display their professional abilities. She also told them that meditation could increase their spirit power, which was the foundation for using all professional skills. However, Shen Hongyu reassured the class that they did not need to rush. She explained that it was completely normal to fail at first. Even she, despite calling herself a genius, had needed half a month of training before she was finally able to complete the first step. Feng Zhou listened to her explanation quietly, preparing to begin his own meditation practice. As Feng Zhou prepared to meditate, his system suddenly appeared before him with a new notification. It detected a learnable skill called the Skeleton Meditation Method, and informed him that it could instantly deduce the skill to the entry level. Without hesitation, Feng Zhou chose to begin learning. The moment he confirmed his choice, countless green runes surrounded his body. A flood of knowledge rushed into his mind, and a vision appeared before him. He saw himself merging with a skeleton as the system rapidly analyzed and mastered the meditation technique for him. A few moments later, the system announced that he had successfully learned the skeleton meditation method. Feng Zhou smiled in surprise, amazed that he had mastered the skill so quickly. The system explained that it was only an apprentice-level, entry-stage meditation method for necromancers. By visualizing a skeleton during meditation, it could slowly increase his spirit attribute. After reading the description, Feng Zhou was not surprised. Since the method only required him to imagine a skeleton, it was easy for the system's deduction ability to master it almost instantly. Feng Zhou quickly realized that mastering the skeleton meditation method was incredibly easy for him. All he had to do was observe his skeleton clone for a short time to complete the visualization required for meditation. He soon discovered another advantage. As long as he did not enter the undead realm, his skeleton clone would continue meditating on its own. That meant he could train around the clock without doing anything. Feng Zhou was amazed and thought that his system truly gave him the perfect talent for becoming a necromancer. Just then, the system informed him that his spirit power had increased enough for him to enter the undead realm once again. Feng Zhou immediately understood that entering the undead realm consumed spirit power, so he could not neglect the training of either his main body or his skeleton clone. Without wasting any time, Feng Zhou activated the undead realm experience and closed his eyes. The next moment, he found himself inside his skeleton clone's body in the undead realm. As soon as he entered, he saw another skeleton walking toward him. Feng Zhou immediately charged toward the skeleton warrior and cut it down with a single powerful slash. As the enemy fell, the system rewarded Feng Zhou with a 0.1 increase in constitution and a 0.1 increase in soul power. Seeing his stats rise once again, Feng Zhou felt excited. He knew he could finally continue hunting monsters and growing stronger without holding back. While hunting in the undead realm, Feng Zhou suddenly received a notification from the system. It informed him that one of his skeleton clone's skills had reached the instinct level. The skill could now be used as material to create a brand new ability for his main body, although the process would require 10 points of soul power. Seeing that, Feng Zhou immediately realized that the skill deduction feature the system had mentioned earlier could only be performed inside the undead realm. Without hesitating, he ordered the system to begin the deduction. The system started analyzing the skill. Green energy surrounded the interface while it searched for a new ability. After a few moments, the deduction was completed successfully, and the system created a new skill called Bone Javelin. The system explained that Bone Javelin allowed the user to condense a spear made of bone and throw it at enemies. The attack dealt both armor-piercing physical damage and death energy damage. Its power, range, and the number of bone javelins that could be created depended on the user's spirit attribute and skill proficiency. After reading the skill's description, Feng Zhou smiled with satisfaction. He realized that the newly created bone javelin perfectly matched the bone weapon he had already been using, making it an ideal skill for him. After unlocking bone javelin, Feng Zhou discovered that it had its own skill tree. The new ability could eventually evolve into advanced techniques such as bone shield, giant bone claw, and bone prison. He was pleasantly surprised that learning one skill had also unlocked several future upgrade paths. Even so, Feng Zhou realized that unlocking those advanced abilities would require much more soul power. As he thought about gathering more soul power, he suddenly noticed undead creatures approaching from a distance. A smile appeared on Feng Zhou's face. He thought it was perfect timing since he had enemies to test his newly acquired skill on. Without hesitation, he activated Bone Javelin. A massive spear made of glowing bone condensed in the air before shooting toward the undead at incredible speed. The powerful attack slammed into the ground with tremendous force, instantly shattering the skeletons and leaving a huge crater behind. After killing the undead skeletons, the Bone Javelin returned to Feng Zhou's hands. After watching the attack, Feng Zhou nodded in satisfaction. He concluded that Bone Javelin was far stronger than beginner-level skills, such as Death Missile and Ray of Enfeeblement, making it one of his most powerful attacks so far. Just then, a system message appeared, telling him that his agility, soul power, and strength had increased by 0.005. Feng Zhou was surprised to see that each one now provided only a tiny increase in his attributes and soul power. The rewards had become much smaller than before. He checked his status and saw that his strength, constitution, agility, spirit, and soul power had increased only slightly. Feng Zhou immediately realized what was happening. The system would not allow him to endlessly farm weak undead for easy rewards. Instead, it was forcing him to explore deeper into the undead realm, where stronger and more dangerous enemies awaited. However, Feng Zhou still could not obtain the bone essence he needed. Since that material had not appeared yet, he decided to keep hunting and devouring low-level undead until he gathered enough resources. Back in the real world, meditation class was still in progress. While everyone else was concentrating on their cultivation, Fang Zhou sat quietly with a grin on his face, thinking about everything he had gained in the undead realm. His strange smile caught the attention of the instructor. She walked over to his desk, gently tapped him on the shoulder, and called out to him. She asked why he was simply sitting there giggling to himself, while everyone else was meditating seriously. Fang Zhou was caught off guard. Embarrassed, he looked at the instructor and awkwardly tried to explain himself. But before he could say anything, Lu Renjia told the teacher that Fang Zhou simply could not meditate successfully. Another student argued that rare professions were supposed to have better meditation effects. However, someone quickly corrected him, explaining that it depended on the profession. He pointed out that necromancers were extremely rare, and because almost no one had ever awakened as one, their skeleton meditation method was incomplete. As a result, it was normal for Fang Zhou to struggle to enter a meditative state. After hearing the student's explanation, Teacher Shen looked at Fang Zhou with sympathy. She gently told him that although meditation was difficult for a necromancer, he should not give up on himself. At the same time, she reminded him that because he was not practicing, the entire class was being delayed. She then pointed at Lu Renjia as an example. In just one class, Lu Renjia had already meditated enough to create the handle of a knife. Lu Renjia humbly thanked Teacher Shen and said he had only understood about 1/3 of the meditation method. He claimed that his cultivation speed was nothing more than average for a genius. After saying that, Lu Renjia smiled, thinking that Fang Zhou should now understand the huge gap between a necromancer and other professions. But Fang Zhou smiled calmly and replied that Lu Renjia's cultivation speed really was very average. His unexpected answer stunned both Teacher Shen and Lu Renjia. Lu Renjia became furious after hearing Fang Zhou's words. He shouted at Fang Zhou and mocked him, saying that someone who could not even enter meditation had no right to brag. Just as he said that, Fang Zhou released a terrifying wave of dark energy and told Lu Renjia to step back. The overwhelming aura shocked Lu Renjia, forcing him to instinctively step backward. Teacher Shen immediately noticed that something was wrong. She quickly shouted for Lu Renjia to focus his mind. Seeing the situation, Teacher Shen turned to Fang Zhou and scolded him. She reminded him that meditation class was for learning meditation, not for fighting. She told him to save any aggressive behavior for combat class instead. Fang Zhou calmly explained that he had only wanted Lu Renjia to step aside so he could show Teacher Shen his true meditation progress. Hearing that, the entire classroom fell silent. The students looked at Fang Zhou in disbelief and wondered if he had actually succeeded in entering meditation. However, some of them dismissed the idea, saying that even if he had succeeded, he had probably only reached 1/10 of the entry stage. Meanwhile, Bai Shaochan quietly looked at Fang Zhou, curious to see what he was about to reveal. Fang Zhou then activated the first stage of the skeleton meditation method. Instantly, a powerful wave of dark energy burst out from his body and spread throughout the classroom like a storm. The terrifying aura shook the entire room, causing everyone to stare at him in shock. Lu Renjia and the other students were left speechless. Their eyes widened as they watched the overwhelming energy surround Fang Zhou. Even Teacher Shen was stunned. She could hardly believe that Fang Zhou had reached the entry stage of the skeleton meditation method in the time of a single class. It was something she had never expected to witness. Fang Zhou stood calmly beneath the dark aura with a faint smile and said that compared to an average genius, he was probably 100 million times more talented. After sensing Fang Zhou's meditation aura, Instructor Lu entered the classroom. He praised Fang Zhou's progress and said he had done very well with the meditation method. He then said that if that was the case, they would have a test tomorrow. Hearing that, Fang Zhou looked at him in surprise and wondered why there would be a test so soon. The other students were equally shocked. Some complained that they had not even reached the entry stage of their meditation methods yet, while others questioned whether combat class was already beginning. Lu Renjia, however, smirked confidently. He mocked Fang Zhou, saying that combat class was completely different from meditation. He declared that once the test began, Fang Zhou, whom he called a weak skeleton mage, would no longer be able to keep pretending. After hearing about the test tomorrow, Fang Zhou entered the undead realm, which was filled with undead creatures. Fang Zhou realized that after reaching the entry stage of the skeleton meditation method, the amount of time he could stay in the undead realm had increased significantly. Without wasting a second, Fang Zhou urged himself not to relax. He knew his spirit power was limited, so he had to kill as many undead creatures as possible before it ran out. He summoned his bone javelin and immediately rushed into battle. He charged through the skeletons with incredible speed, cutting down skeletons one after another. Each swing of his weapon shattered enemies into piles of broken bones. He moved faster and faster, attacking more and more enemies before his spirit power was exhausted. After defeating countless undead creatures, Fang Zhou finally stopped. Behind him there was a mountain of skeleton bones, but Fang Zhou's spirit power was almost completely exhausted, and he could not continue fighting for the day. At that moment, a system notification appeared before Fang Zhou. It announced that his professional level had increased, and that his accompanying skeleton clone could now be strengthened. Fang Zhou smiled when he saw the message. He realized that all of his hard work had not been wasted. Without hesitation, he selected yes to begin the upgrade. Green energy immediately surrounded Fang Zhou's clone as the clone started evolving. A powerful aura burst from its body, and its entire form began to glow. Its attack and clothes changed completely. After the upgrade was completed, the skeleton clone became much stronger. It had advanced to the middle stage of the apprentice rank. Its attributes had increased, and it automatically learned a new skill called Brutal Strike. Fang Zhou was pleasantly surprised. He had not expected that simply upgrading the clone would also grant it a new skill. He checked the skill's description, and learned that Brutal Strike allowed the skeleton clone to release an explosive attack with tremendous force. The skill's power depended on the clone's strength attribute and its proficiency with the skill. Seeing this, Fang Zhou was delighted. He realized that with this new ability, he would be able to defeat undead creatures much faster. However, just as he was studying the skill, he suddenly felt dizzy. He quickly realized that he had become so focused on the new skill that he had forgotten his spirit power had already been completely drained. He then left the undead realm. The next day, at the sports field of Haicheng High School, Fang Zhou arrived there with a splitting headache. He held his head in pain and realized that his spirit power was still far too low. Excessive use of the undead realm had completely drained his mental energy. Bai Xiaoken noticed that Fang Zhou had looked exhausted ever since the meditation class and asked if something was wrong. Fang Zhou smiled and said he was fine. He explained that he had simply been practicing for too long every day. Deep down, however, he decided that no one could ever learn about his system. From now on, he would only enter the undead realm when he was alone. Just then, Lu Renjia, along with some other students, arrived there and mocked Fang Zhou. They laughed that the necromancer profession was useless, and said he became weak after meditating for only a little longer. They also claimed that reaching the entry stage of the meditation method meant nothing because true strength was what really mattered. Bai Xiaochen could no longer stay silent. She stepped forward and told them to stop bullying him, pointing out that Fang Zhou had never done anything to offend them. However, Lu Renjia simply shrugged and insisted that he was only telling the truth. Irritated, Fang Zhou mockingly asked whether Lu Renjia wanted to get beaten up again. Hearing that, Lu Renjia became furious and shouted that he was no longer the same person he had been a week earlier. As he drew his blade with a confident grin, he revealed that he had already learned a professional skill. He arrogantly declared that defeating Fang Zhou would only take a single move. But just then, Teacher Lu appeared there and shouted for everyone to stop. The students immediately fell silent and greeted him respectfully. Teacher Lu sternly reminded Lu Renjia that the school taught them skills to fight vicious ghosts in the future, not to fight each other. Hearing his warning, Lu Renjia immediately lowered his head and admitted his mistake. Teacher Lu then turned to Fang Zhou. He said he had already seen Fang Zhou's meditation class results and told him that he also needed to work hard in combat class. Fang Zhou nodded and agreed without hesitation. As Teacher Lu walked away, Fang Zhou realized that the teacher seemed to be intentionally looking out for him. He quietly wondered why Teacher Lu was treating him with such special care. A moment later, Teacher Lu ordered everyone to gather on the sports field. The students quickly responded and rushed over, answering loudly that they understood. Teacher Lu then instructed one of the assistants to bring all the training equipment. The assistant immediately agreed and went to carry out the order. The students looked curiously as a large covered object was brought onto the sports field. They wondered what it was. Teacher Lu removed the cover and revealed an apprentice-level test golem. He explained that the golem was used to measure a student's attack power and defense. According to him, its strength was based on the weakest abyss demon, the Impia. It had an attack power of 100 and a defense of 100, meaning a person needed at least 100 defense to block an imp's sharp claws head-on. One student noticed that the test golem looked old and worn out. He wondered if it could be broken during the test. Teacher Lu laughed and firmly replied that no new student had ever managed to destroy one of these golems. He then announced a challenge. If any student could destroy a golem using their own strength, he would personally apply for a reward of 20 alliance contribution points on that student's behalf. The students immediately became excited. They were amazed by the generous reward and cheered loudly, saying they finally had a good reason to give the test their all. Feng Zhou knew that alliance contribution points were extremely valuable. In this world, they worked like money and could be used to buy equipment, items, and powerful skills. As soon as Teacher Lu announced the test, many students eagerly volunteered to go first. Teacher Lu told everyone to line up one by one and explained that the common profession students would take the test first. The first student stepped forward and gathered flames around his hands. He cast a fireball and launched it at the test golem. The attack exploded on impact, but the golem remained standing. After checking the result, Teacher Lu announced that the student's attack score was only 48. He told him that he still needed much more practice. The student was shocked because the spell had felt much stronger than the score suggested. Next, another student rushed forward with a sword and unleashed a powerful skill called Crippling Strike, but he got only 41 points. The next student stepped forward with a bow and used the skill Petrifying Arrow. The glowing arrow shot toward the test golem, but even after the attack, the result was still 50. After every student with a common profession had finished, Teacher Lu announced that it was now the turn of the students with special professions to come onto the stage one by one. The common profession students sighed in disappointment. None of the common professions had managed to score higher than 60. They finally understood why Teacher Lu had confidently offered 20 alliance contribution points as a reward. They believed there was no way any of them could earn it. At the same time, they became curious to see what scores the students with hidden and special professions would achieve. Meanwhile, Feng Zhou quietly thought about his own abilities. He realized that almost all of his attack power currently came from his summoned skeleton. He wondered whether the test golem would count the damage dealt by his skeleton together with his own attack power. Lu Renjia noticed Feng Zhou's hesitant expression and mocked him. He confidently said that Feng Zhou's attack power was probably at the very bottom. Feng Zhou simply looked at him in confusion. Lu Renjia then drew his weapon and charged toward the test golem. With a confident grin, he declared that now that he had learned a skill, he would show Feng Zhou the huge gap between their abilities. Lu Renjia used his hidden profession skill, Phantom Dagger, and slashed the test golem. After the attack, the golem displayed an attack score of 80. Teacher Lu announced that Lu Renjia's attack capability was 80. Proud of his result, Lu Renjia boasted that this was the true power of the hidden profession, Phantom Assassin. However, Bai Xiaoqin immediately asked him what he was so proud of, saying he was not the only one who had awakened a hidden profession. Teacher Lu then called out, asking Yi Fan to come forward for his test. Yi Fan confidently stepped onto the field. The surrounding students remembered that Yi Fan had awakened the hidden profession Demon Hunter. They also heard rumors that the school's top officials had chosen him immediately after his awakening, and had even created a special research group just for him. Everyone looked at him with envy and wondered how high his attack score would be. Ye Fan calmly raised his hand, and a strange bladed weapon appeared, surrounded by green energy. Without hesitation, he rushed toward the test golem, preparing to show the true strength of the demon hunter profession. Ye Fan attacked the test golem with his vengeance strike, and the first hit gave him an attack score of 65. Some students were surprised because the score was only slightly higher than Lu Renjia's attack. They wondered if that was all the demon hunter could do. However, Ye Fan declared that it was not over yet. He continued attacking without stopping, and each strike increased the golem's recorded value. The score quickly rose from 69 to 88, then reached 100 after his final blow. Teacher Lu announced that Ye Fan's final attack capability was 100. Ye Fan had successfully shown the true strength of his hidden profession. Watching everything from the side, Feng Zhou realized that the test golem could calculate attack power cumulatively. After understanding this rule, he smiled to himself. He concluded that if attack values could be added together, then destroying the test golem should not be difficult for him either. After Ye Fan finished his test, he looked at the remaining students, and proudly said that no one in the class could surpass him anymore. He was confident that his score of 100 would remain the highest. Lu Renjia, however, was unhappy. He complained that Ye Fan had only reached such a high score because the test allowed multiple attacks to be added together. He grumbled that if he had known about that rule earlier, he would have attacked several more times as well. Bai Xiaoqian immediately reminded him that, as an assassin, he did not even have a combo skill to chain attacks like Ye Fan. The instructor then called Bai Xiaoqian to take her turn. She confidently stepped forward, Bai Xiaoqian thought that she was also a hidden profession user and could not afford to embarrass herself. She gathered her power, surrounded herself with swirling green energy, and prepared to launch her attack at the test golem. Bai Xiaoqian attacked the test golem with all her strength, but the result was disappointing. The instructor announced that her attack capability was only 31. Bai Xiaoqian sighed in frustration and admitted that support professions naturally had low combat power. Lu Renjie immediately burst into laughter and mocked her. He said that she had acted so confidently, yet her attack power was only 31. Hearing that, Bai Xiaoqian got furious and said that if she had awakened the assassin profession instead of her current one, her attack capability would have easily exceeded 80. The instructor ignored the argument and called Gu Zhekyo to take the test. Gu Zhekyo, a storm mage, cast Chain Wind Energy Missile and struck the test golem with a powerful spell. The instructor announced that Gu Zhekyo's attack capability was 72. Next, Zhao Yuan, an Earth Knight, rushed forward and used shield armor charge to smash into the golem. His attack capability was measured at 69. After him, Chen Yong, a heavy hammer warrior, unleashed Giant Hammer Smash. His powerful blow earned him an attack capability of 84. The students looked at the results and noticed that everyone else's attack power was much higher than Bai Xiaoqian's. However, none of them had managed to surpass Ye Fan's perfect score of 100. One student sighed and said it was a pity that no one could destroy the test golem, meaning Teacher Lu's reward of 20 Alliance contribution points would remain unclaimed. Another student disagreed. He reminded everyone that one hidden profession user had still not taken the test. They pointed toward Fang Zhou, the Necromancer, and wondered if he could surprise everyone. However, Lu Renjie immediately laughed at the idea. He mocked the others for placing their hopes on a Necromancer, and confidently claimed that Fang Zhou would not even reach 10 attack power. He even joked that Fang Zhou's summoned skeletons might not be able to stand properly. Fang Zhou calmly walked over and asked Lu Renjie if he was really so sure that he could not win the 20 Alliance contribution points. Lu Renjie laughed even louder and confidently replied that he was certain. He boldly declared that if Fang Zhou managed to destroy the test golem as well, he would eat the entire golem on the spot. Fang Zhou smiled and reminded him that those were his own words. Lu Renjie looked confused as Fang Zhou walked past him toward the testing area. Once he reached the test golem, Fang Zhou asked everyone to step back a little before he began his attack. Lu Renjie mocked Fang Zhou and asked if he was afraid that everyone would laugh at him because his attack power would be too low. Fang Zhou replied that it was not because of that. The skill he was about to use needed a large amount of space. As soon as he finished speaking, the whole sky turned green and filled with an undead army. Dark energy spread across the area, and countless green chains appeared. One skeleton after another emerged from the darkness until 10 skeletons stood behind Fang Zhou. The students were stunned. They could not believe that Fang Zhou had summoned 10 skeletons. They remembered that a newly awakened apprentice-level necromancer could normally summon only 2 skeletons. Some even wondered if Fang Zhou had already advanced to the Black Iron Mage rank. Teacher Lu was equally shocked. He recalled that Su Xinyan, who was known as the most talented necromancer in history, had been able to summon only 5 skeletons when she first awakened. Looking at Fang Zhou's 10 skeletons, he began to wonder if Fang Zhou's talent had already surpassed Su Xinyan's. Fang Zhou walked up to the test golem and thought that it was a good thing he had held back a little. Otherwise, he believed he would have attracted even more attention. He then calmly gave a single command for his skeletons to attack. The skeletons rushed toward the test golem at incredible speed. Their movements were so fast that everyone watching was shocked. The skeleton warriors surrounded the golem and launched a series of attacks. One after another, their strikes landed on the golem, and the attack values of 30, 45, 60, and 65 appeared above it. Some students watched the scene and said that although the attack looked impressive, the damage was not very high. They admitted that an attack value of 65 was already respectable because many warriors could not even reach that level. However, they still believed that even with so many skeletons attacking together, necromancers were still too weak. Lu Renjie laughed at Fang Zhou after seeing the attack value of 65. He mocked him, saying that was all he could do. He pointed out that, on average, a single skeleton could not even reach 10 attack points. Fang Zhou remained calm and told them not to rush, because it was only the beginning. Hearing that, Lu Renjie mocked him again and asked if he was still refusing to give up. Fang Zhou smiled and said that if 10 skeletons were not enough, then he would simply make it 20. As soon as he finished speaking, more skeletons appeared behind him. The crowd was stunned. They realized that Fang Zhou had been holding back all along. Someone counted at least 20 skeletons and wondered if there had ever been such a powerful necromancer in history. Bai Xiaochan smiled confidently and said she had always believed Fang Zhou could do it. Moments later, the skeletons attacked together again. Their continuous strikes caused the test golem's attack value to rise rapidly. The display jumped from 65 to 91. The skeletons continued attacking the test golem without stopping. With every strike, the attack value on the golem's display kept rising until it reached 105. A moment later, the attack became too powerful. The test golem could no longer withstand the damage and exploded with a loud blast. The explosion shocked everyone, and the crowd stared in complete silence. Then someone realized that the score was not just 105. Fang Zhou had actually broken the test golem's maximum limit. The students were stunned. They could not believe that someone who had only recently awakened possessed such terrifying power. Many called Fang Zhou a complete monster, rather than an ordinary human. Lu Renjia stood frozen as he looked at the shattered display. He realized that Fang Zhou had exceeded the golem's numerical limit, something he had never imagined was possible. Overwhelmed with shock, he could only stare at the destroyed machine and wonder how such a thing could happen. Fang Zhou calmly walked over to the broken test golem and picked up its shattered head. Holding it out to Lu Renjia, he told him that he could eat it now, reminding him of his earlier promise. Lu Renjia was left speechless. Fang Zhou casually added that if he did not want to eat it, that was fine as well. Then Fang Zhou's expression suddenly turned cold. He looked at Lu Renjia and ordered him to disappear from his sight forever. Lu Renjia was frightened by Fang Zhou's intimidating aura. He quickly backed away and said that he would make Fang Zhou pay for this the next time they met before leaving in embarrassment. After Lu Renjia left, Bai Xiaochan excitedly ran over to Fang Zhou. She praised him for being unbelievably strong and eagerly asked him how he had become so powerful, hoping he would teach her. Fang Zhou smiled awkwardly and casually replied that he had only practiced ordinary meditation training. Instructor Lu warmly praised Fang Zhou, saying that he had done an excellent job and had truly opened his eyes. Fang Zhou humbly replied that the teacher was giving him too much credit. Instructor Lu then promised that he would fight to secure Fang Zhou a place on the school's specially cultivated seed list. Later, inside the principal's office, the principal reviewed the awakening results. Out of 10,000 new students, 9,103 had successfully awakened, while 897 had failed, giving the school an awakening success rate of about 91%. He continued reading the report and noted that there were 85 students with rare professions. These included Zhao Yuan, an earth knight, Bai Xiaochan, a chanting string user, Gu Jiqiad, a storm mage, Ye Fan, a demon hunter, and several others. The principal nodded with satisfaction and thought that all 85 rare profession users could be placed directly into the school's specially cultivated seed list. However, when he came to Fang Zhou's profile, he frowned. Seeing that Fang Zhou's class was Necromancer, he believed it had no future. Without considering Fang Zhou's performance any further, he decided that Fang Zhou should be left out of the seed list. At the principal's office, someone suddenly knocked on the door. The principal called for the person outside to come in. A moment later, Teacher Lu entered the room. The principal looked at him with surprise and asked why he was there instead of teaching the combat class. Teacher Lu replied that he had an urgent matter to report. The principal asked why Teacher Lu seemed to be in such a hurry. Teacher Lu quickly searched through the student files until he found Fang Zhou's profile. Holding the file up, Teacher Lu strongly recommended that Fang Zhou, the Necromancer, be added to the school's specially cultivated seed list. The principal frowned and explained that although the Necromancer profession had great potential, experience had shown that it was extremely difficult to unlock that potential in real battles. Teacher Lu immediately brought up Major Senyun, saying that she was also a Necromancer and that her combat strength was no weaker than that of other powerful mages. The principal shook his head and explained that Su Xingyan was only as strong as she was because her father, a legendary expert, had personally trained and nurtured her from the beginning. Looking at Teacher Lu, the principal then asked what special advantage or qualification Fang Zhou had that made him worthy of being included on the school's seed list. The principal told Teacher Lu that he knew Fang Zhou's parents had once fought beside him and that they were true heroes of the Federation. However, he explained that the school's seed list was extremely important. Being selected did not only provide students with valuable resources, but also placed a great responsibility on their shoulders. Teacher Lu nodded and said that was exactly why he wanted to recommend Fang Zhou. He handed the principal Fang Zhou's reports from both the meditation class and the combat class. The the principal became curious and started reading the reports. As he looked through them, he was shocked to discover that Fang Zhou had mastered the skeleton meditation method during his very first meditation class. He was even more surprised to learn that Fang Zhou could already summon more than 20 skeletons in real combat. Teacher Lu confidently said that with such extraordinary talent, Fang Zhou had a very high chance of creating a new chapter in the history of necromancers. After hearing this, the principal told Teacher Lu that there was no need to say anything else. He decided that they would wait and see Fang Zhou's performance once the simulated battlefield opened, before making the final decision. After Teacher Lu left the office, the principal looked at Fang Zhou's file again. With a thoughtful smile, he wondered what kind of surprises Fang Zhou would bring, and looked forward to seeing what he could accomplish. On the other hand, as Fang Zhou was leaving, Bai Xiaochan ran after him and excitedly asked how he had managed to summon so many skeletons during his very first combat class. Fang Zhou smiled and said it was nothing special. He casually replied that he had only summoned a few more skeletons than usual, and did not think it was a big deal. Bai Xiaochan laughed and told him that being too humble was just another form of arrogance. Fang Zhou smiled awkwardly and admitted that he honestly did not think his achievement was that impressive. Deep down, Fang Zhou thought that he could not reveal the truth. The strength he had shown so far was only a tiny fraction of his real power, and he had no intention of exposing everything. Just then, someone called out to him from behind and asked him to wait. Fang Zhou and Bai Xiaochan turned around and saw Ye Fan approaching them. Ye Fan confidently declared that he had never considered himself weaker than anyone. Looking at all the students in Class 1, he believed that only Fang Zhou was worthy of being his opponent. Fang Zhou and Bai Xiaochan looked at each other in silence, both confused by Ye Fan's sudden challenge. Fang Zhou calmly refused. He apologized and said he had no interest in accepting a challenge from a Chunibu. As he walked away, Bai Xiaochan quietly commented that Ye Fan was a weird person. Ye Fan quickly stopped them and explained that it was not an ordinary challenge. He sincerely hoped Fang Zhou would become his sparring partner. Fang Zhou looked at him with surprise and asked what he meant by a sparring partner. Ye Fan explained that after awakening the rare profession of demon hunter, he had joined the Demon Hunter Scientific Research Group. During their research, they needed someone of equal strength to spar with, so they could continue their experiments. Fang Zhou listened before asking why he should cooperate with Ye Fan's research. Without hesitation, Ye Fan offered a reward. He said he would pay Fang Zhou 10 alliance contribution points for 2 weeks of sparring, and that the offer also included free room and board. Fang Zhou immediately accepted the offer and shook Ye Fan's hand, saying that it was a pleasure doing business with him. Ye Fan smiled happily and said he had expected nothing less from the rival he had chosen. Bai Xiaochan was completely shocked that Fang Zhou had agreed so easily. Ye Fan then excitedly told Fang Zhou to come with him right away. As they followed Ye Fan, Bai Xiaochan asked Fang Zhou if he had really agreed to work with that strange guy just like that. Fang Zhou smiled and replied that 10 alliance contribution points were a lot, so there was no reason to refuse. At the same time, Fang Zhou thought to himself that the people waiting for him at home would probably need those contribution points very much. A moment later, Fang Zhou asked if Ye Fan came from a rich family because he was spending contribution points so generously. Bai Xiaochan shook her head and explained that Ye Fan was not a rich kid. She said those contribution points had only been advanced to him by the Research Association. Surprised, Fang Zhou asked if the Research Association was really that generous. Bai Xiaochan explained that it was only in advance. Ye Fan would eventually have to repay all of those contribution points later. As they watched Ye Fan run ahead, Bai Xiaochan told Fang Zhou that with the way Ye Fan spent contribution points, he would probably still be paying off his debt even 20 years after graduation. Fang Zhou finally understood why Ye Fan could spend so freely. A short while later, Ye Fan stopped in front of a large building and excitedly called for them to come inside. After entering, Ye Fan proudly introduced the place as the laboratory of the Demon Hunter Research Group and asked Fang Zhou what he thought of it. Fang Zhou looked around the well-equipped laboratory and was impressed. He thought that rare profession holders were truly treated exceptionally well. At that moment, a man with a mechanical arm greeted them. He introduced himself as Chen Chengshan, a silver-level Gale Ranger, and the person in charge of the Demon Hunter Research Association. Fang Zhou politely greeted Professor Chen. Looking at Professor Chen's hand, Fang Zhou could tell that although Professor Chen was now a logistics researcher, he still carried the powerful aura of someone who had fought on the front lines for many years. As they walked through the laboratory, Professor Chen explained that another senior demon hunter had recently earned the legendary crown in the Abyss Mystic Realm. That hunter had even defeated an Abyss Lord, proving his overwhelming combat strength. Because of Ye Fan's demon hunter profession and its great potential, Haicheng Military Academy had attached great importance to him. To help him grow stronger, they had established a special scientific research group dedicated to developing his abilities. Professor Chen then turned to Feng Zhou and said that he had already reviewed his records as well. He added that if Feng Zhou was interested, the association could also create a small research group specifically for him. Feng Zhou quickly waved his hands and politely refused the offer. Inwardly, he thought that he did not want to end up paying off debt for 20 years after graduation, just like Ye Fan was expected to do. Professor Chen did not mind Feng Zhou's refusal. Instead, he suggested that they begin the real combat research. He then led everyone to a large training arena built inside the laboratory. He explained that the research group had already prepared strict safety measures. Because of those precautions, they could fight with their full strength without worrying about their lives being in danger. Professor Chen also told Feng Zhou and Ye Fan that, to help them display their full combat power, each of them could choose 3 pieces of combat equipment from the armory. As Feng Zhou looked toward Ye Fan, he carefully analyzed his opponent. He knew that Ye Fan was not weak. His incredible speed and powerful burst attacks were a perfect counter to Feng Zhou's summoned skeletons. Wanting to improve his chances, Feng Zhou decided it was time to use his skill deduction ability to strengthen his own combat power. He focused on his skills and upgraded Summon Skeleton, while also improving Bone Javelin to level 2 and unlocking Bone Shield at level 1. Meanwhile, Ye Fan picked up his bladed bow and calmly said that he had recently mastered the weapon mastery skill for the bladed bow. Confident in his strength, he declared that even if Feng Zhou summoned 20 skeletons, it still would not be enough to defeat him. Feng Zhou simply smiled and replied that Ye Fan might be right. However, he believed the outcome could change after he added points to his own skills. Using his skill points, Feng Zhou enhanced his abilities. His strength remained modest, but his Bone Javelin reached the mastered level, Bone Shield advanced to the proficient level, and his overall combat ability increased noticeably. After that, Feng Zhou equipped an apprentice staff, a standard weapon that slightly increased the power of his spells. He also put on an apprentice robe, which slightly reduced the damage he would take in battle. Holding his staff and wearing his new equipment, Feng Zhou looked toward Ye Fan with a confident smile and said he hoped Ye Fan would not disappoint him. Ye Fan looked at Feng Zhou and praised his confidence, saying that it was worthy of his rival. However, he then revealed that the enhancements he had received from the Demon Hunter Research Association were far beyond what Feng Zhou could imagine. As soon as he finished speaking, Ye Fan activated his enhanced power. A powerful aura burst out from his body as he jumped at Feng Zhou to attack. The researchers watching the match began discussing the outcome. One of them immediately believed Ye Fan would win because they had observed him closely throughout the week. She explained that Ye Fan possessed the most terrifying combat instincts she had ever seen. Just then, Teacher Lu arrived. After hearing the researchers' opinions, he said they were reaching a conclusion far too quickly. Professor Chen was surprised to see him and asked why he had come. Teacher Lu replied that 2 of his best students were about to fight each other, so as their teacher, he naturally wanted to watch the match. When Professor Chen then asked Teacher Lu if he truly believed Feng Zhou could defeat Ye Feng, Teacher Lu answered without hesitation that he did. However, Professor Chen did not agree and said that although Feng Zhou could summon many skeletons, he was still a mage with a fragile body. He believed that his physical weakness had not changed. He also revealed that Ye Fan had mastered an extremely powerful displacement skill the previous day and hinted that it might surprise everyone. Hearing this, Teacher Lu became interested and watched the battle more closely. In the arena, Ye Fan suddenly rushed forward and attacked Feng Zhou at incredible speed. Feng Zhou dodged quickly and realized that Ye Fan's close-range combat ability was extremely dangerous. He immediately backed off and decided to keep as much distance as possible instead of fighting him head-on. However, Ye Fan smiled confidently and told Feng Zhou that keeping his distance would not keep him safe. He then activated his newly learned skill, Demon Hunting Arrow. Blue energy arrows instantly formed in his hand and shot toward Feng Zhou. Seeing this, Feng Zhou raised his staff and immediately began casting Summon Skeleton. A glowing magic circle appeared beneath him as green energy surrounded the area. Immediately, several skeleton warriors rose from the ground. Those skeletons blocked Ye Fan's demon hunting arrows with their bodies. Seeing this, Ye Fan quickly realized that allowing Feng Zhou to keep summoning would only make the battle harder. He decided that he had to interrupt Fang Zhou's summoning rhythm before more skeletons could appear. He shot multiple blue energy arrows. Those arrows rained down, striking the magic circle beneath Fang Zhou. The attack disrupted the summoning process and prevented another skeleton from being fully summoned. Ye Fan did not stop there and immediately shot many arrows at Fang Zhou. Fang Zhou jumped to the side and narrowly avoided the barrage of arrows. Sweat appeared on his face as he dodged one attack after another. Fang Zhou quickly placed his hand on the ground and formed another magic circle. Green energy spread across the arena as he successfully cast Summon Skeleton once again. Several new skeleton warriors rose from the ground and formed a defensive wall around him, blocking Ye Fan's incoming blue energy arrows. Watching the battle from above, Professor Chen smiled and admitted that the younger generation was truly impressive. He said that even if Fang Zhou lost to Ye Fan, his performance alone was enough for him to approve Fang Zhou's selection for the seed list. Instructor Lu shook his head and told Professor Chen not to celebrate too soon. Knowing that Fang Zhou's temperament was calm and experienced, Instructor Lu believed that Fang Zhou still had hidden trump cards that had not yet been used. Back in the arena, Ye Fan's arrows continued destroying the skeletons one after another. Seeing this, Fang Zhou realized that holding back was no longer an option. He decided that it was finally time to fight with his full strength. Fang Zhou stopped holding back and raised his staff high into the air. Green energy burst out from the magic circle beneath him as he unleashed his full power and cast Summon Skeleton once again. As his skeletons came out, Professor Chen was shocked. He counted nearly 30 skeletons and could not believe it. One of his assistants wondered how someone who had awakened only a few days earlier had already improved his skill to such an unbelievable level. Surrounded by the newly summoned skeletons, Ye Fan smiled instead of showing fear. He admitted that Fang Zhou was impressive and declared that only someone with this level of strength was worthy of being his rival. Fang Zhou remained calm as he observed Ye Fan's reaction. He found it strange that Ye Fan stayed so composed even while being surrounded by dozens of skeletons. Fang Zhou became certain that Ye Fan was hiding another plan. At that moment, Ye Fan's eyes glowed green as he rushed forward. He unleashed his fierce strike skill, cutting through the skeletons in front of him with incredible speed. One skeleton after another was smashed apart and collapsed into piles of broken bones. Ye Fan quickly judged that the distance between himself and Fang Zhou was close enough. He used his shadow charge skill and charged forward at full speed while cutting through every skeleton that stood in his way. Ye Fan rushed in with unstoppable momentum and appeared behind Fang Zhou. Professor Chen, who was watching the battle, believed the match was already over. He thought that a mage fighting at close range could never survive against someone as powerful as Ye Fan. Instructor Lu was speechless upon seeing this. Ye Fan gathered all of his strength and unleashed his Vengeance Fierce Strike skill, aiming to finish the battle with a single devastating attack. However, Fang Zhou had expected this all along. Ye Fan had taken the bait exactly as he had intended. Fang Zhou calmly activated Bone Shield, just as Ye Fan's powerful attack reached him. A giant bone shield appeared and completely blocked the strike before hitting Ye Fan with equal force and sending him flying. Shocked, Ye Fan stared at the shield and wondered what kind of skill it was. Instructor Lu was stunned when he realized that it was a Necromancer's new skill. Professor Chen could hardly believe that Fang Zhou had comprehended a new skill entirely on his own, calling such an achievement almost impossible. Fang Zhou admitted that Ye Fan was much stronger than he had expected. He explained that because of Ye Fan's strength, he had no choice but to rely on tactics instead of fighting him head-on. As Ye Fan watched carefully, Fang Zhou suddenly threw his skull-top staff onto the ground. That unexpected move caught everyone by surprise. Professor Chen was stunned, while Instructor Lu shook his head with a helpless smile, realizing that Fang Zhou's fighting style was incredibly tricky and full of clever tactics. They realized that Fang Zhou had used an optical camouflage cloak to hide himself among his skeleton warriors. By blending in with them, he made it almost impossible for Ye Fan to tell which one was the real Fang Zhou. Ye Fan looked around nervously, unable to find Fang Zhou's true body. Immediately, the skeletons attacked him. Surrounded by skeletons, Ye Fan became frustrated and shouted for Fang Zhou to come out and face him directly. However, the skeletons continued closing in, leaving him with no way to identify his real opponent. Realizing that he would eventually be overwhelmed if the fight continued like this, Ye Fan decided that he had no choice but to use his strongest move. He released a powerful burst of energy and flew high into the air. Seeing this, Instructor Lu was shocked. He could not believe that Ye Fan had already mastered such a powerful skill at his current level. Professor Chen explained that although the skill had a long cooldown, it possessed incredible burst power and was excellent for breaking out of dangerous situations. Flying high above the arena, Ye Fan finally spotted the real Fang Zhou hiding among the skeletons. Locking onto his target, he immediately unleashed Skyfall Strike and shouted for Fang Zhou to take his attack. Ye Fan roared as he poured all of his strength into Skyfall Strike. Wrapped in blazing green energy, he descended from the sky like a meteor, aiming his full-powered attack at Fang Zhou. The powerful strike crashed into the ground with a massive explosion. The impact blasted the surrounding skeletons apart, sending bones flying in every direction. Thick clouds of dust filled the arena as the shockwave spread across the battlefield. When the dust began to settle, Fang Zhou, wearing the camouflage cloak, was revealed. He had taken the attack directly and was lying injured on the ground. Ye Fan let out a deep breath after using such a powerful skill. Looking at Fang Zhou, Ye Fan declared that Fang Zhou was indeed strong. However, he proudly stated that he, Ye Fan, also had his own pride and would never accept defeat so easily. After defeating the disguised Fang Zhou, Ye Fan immediately told the staff to call the medical team. He believed Fang Zhou had been struck by his attack, and he did not want anyone to get seriously injured. However, the people watching the battle did not celebrate his victory. Instead, they looked shocked and uneasy. Seeing their expressions, Ye Fan felt that something was wrong. He realized that this was not how people reacted when someone had won. Confused, Ye Fan looked at the fallen Fang Zhou again. To his surprise, the camouflage cloak slipped away and revealed the body hidden beneath it. It was not Fang Zhou at all, but only a skeleton with a fake human head attached to it. Ye Fan was completely stunned. He finally realized that Fang Zhou had not disguised himself as a skeleton. Instead, he had disguised a skeleton to look like himself, while he secretly disguised himself as an ordinary skeleton. It was a clever double disguise that had fooled everyone, including Ye Fan. As Ye Fan was still shocked by the truth, suddenly more skeletons were summoned and surrounded him. One of them grabbed his leg, making him unable to move. At that moment, Fang Zhou stepped out from among the skeletons and called Ye Fan's name while pointing his staff at him. With a faint smile, he thanked Ye Fan for letting him win through his clever strategy. Ye Fan lowered his weapon and, after a brief silence, admitted his defeat. The referee immediately announced that Fang Zhou was the winner of the match. Just as it was announced, Ye Fan's exhausted body started falling. He realized that the powerful skill he had used earlier had drained almost all of his strength, leaving him completely exhausted. Just then, one of Fang Zhou's skeletons walked over and gently supported Ye Fan before he could collapse. Ye Fan gave a faint smile and thanked Fang Zhou, but Fang Zhou smiled back and jokingly told Ye Fan not to worry. He said Ye Fan could simply think of it as his sympathy for the loser. Hearing those words, Ye Fan immediately became fired up again. He declared that failure was only fuel to make him stronger, and confidently warned Fang Zhou to wait, because one day he would surpass him. Fang Zhou laughed awkwardly and quickly admitted that he had only been joking, asking Ye Fan not to take it so seriously. As the match ended, Professor Chen and Instructor Lu walked over to Fang Zhou. Although Professor Chen was reluctant to admit it, he praised Fang Zhou, saying that his combat ability had far exceeded his expectations. Fang Zhou politely greeted him. Professor Chen then complimented Fang Zhou's clever tactics, saying that with such excellent strategic thinking, he would surely become a great tactical master in the future. Fang Zhou could not help but feel that the praise sounded more like a compliment about his tricks than his actual strength. Teacher Lu then stepped forward and asked Fang Zhou whether the shield spell he had used during the battle was a new skill he had comprehended by himself. Fang Zhou nodded and confirmed that it was indeed a new skill he had learned on his own. Fang Zhou explained that while practicing Summon Skeleton, he had gained new insights and successfully comprehended 2 new skills. He then demonstrated them and said he had named them Bone Javelin and Bone Shield. Professor Chen and Teacher Lu fell silent for a moment, completely stunned by what they had just heard. Teacher Lu suddenly burst into laughter and patted Fang Zhou on the back happily. He praised Fang Zhou, saying he really knew how to surprise them. Fang Zhou smiled awkwardly and jokingly asked his teacher to be a little gentler. Teacher Lu then suggested that Professor Chen use the professional testing equipment available there to measure the power of Fang Zhou's 2 new skills. Professor Chen immediately agreed and said he would make the arrangements. However, Fang Zhou admitted that his spirit power had been completely exhausted after the battle. He apologized and said he was afraid he could not test the new skills right away. Teacher Lu simply patted him on the shoulder and told him not to worry because it was only a small problem. He then brought out a whole box of spirit power recovery potions. Looking at the bottles, Fang Zhou jokingly asked if Teacher Lu was serving draft beer. Teacher Lu laughed and replied that there was no need to pour it into a glass. He told Fang Zhou to drink the bottles directly. After drinking several spirit power recovery potions one after another, Fang Zhou quickly restored his spirit power, watching him empty bottle after bottle as if he were simply drinking water. Everyone remarked that it was their first time seeing someone consume recovery potions so casually. Once Fang Zhou had fully recovered, Teacher Lu told him to get ready because the test was about to begin. Professor Chen announced that the combat golem had been prepared. Fang Zhou nodded, ready to start. Instructor Lu told him to attack the golem just as he had during combat class. Fang Zhou calmly agreed. He then activated Bone Javelin. A long spear made entirely of bone formed in front of him, glowing with necromantic energy. With a wave of his hand, the bone spear shot forward at incredible speed and struck the golem directly. The testing equipment immediately displayed the result. The attack had a power rating of 85. Professor Chen was pleasantly surprised by the result. He praised the attack power, saying it was exceptionally impressive for a newly awakened student. He added that what made it even more remarkable was that Bone Javelin was a skill Fang Zhou had created and comprehended entirely on his own. Teacher Lu told Fang Zhou that the next test would measure the defensive ability of his new skill. Fang Zhou calmly nodded and prepared himself. As soon as the test began, the combat golem charged straight toward him and threw a powerful punch. Fang Zhou immediately activated Bone Shield. A sturdy shield made of bones appeared in front of him and blocked the golem's attack without breaking. The testing equipment displayed the result, showing a defense rating of 80. After seeing the results, Teacher Lu smiled with satisfaction, saying Fang Zhou's attack power was already comparable to that of a storm mage, while his defense was on par with an earth knight. Such balanced abilities were extremely rare for a newly awakened necromancer. Unable to hide his excitement, Teacher Lu enthusiastically praised Fang Zhou, declaring that he had been born to become a necromancer. He even patted Fang Zhou on the shoulder repeatedly. Fang Zhou smiled awkwardly and jokingly asked his teacher to stop patting him, saying that other people might think he was trying to inflate his test results. Professor Chen then stepped forward and praised the two new skills. He suggested that Fang Zhou submit Bone Javelin and Bone Shield to the skill repository so that they could be officially recorded and shared. Hearing the suggestion, Fang Zhou was a little surprised. Fang Zhou knew that the skill repository was a collection of skills established by the Federation. Anyone could spend contribution points there to exchange for the skills they wanted. Professor Chen explained that their research institute had its own branch of the Federation's skill repository, so Fang Zhou could use it whenever he wished. Fang Zhou thanked him and said he would rely on his help. Teacher Lu then led Fang Zhou to the skill repository room and explained that after Fang Zhou uploaded his newly created skills, he would earn contribution points. Those points could later be used to exchange for other valuable skills from the repository. Fang Zhou thanked Teacher Lu for the explanation. After that, Fang Zhou walked to the entrance of the skill repository and pushed open the large wooden door. However, instead of seeing shelves full of books, he found himself surrounded by complete darkness. Confused, he wondered how a skill library could be so dark. A moment later, lights slowly appeared, revealing a massive library filled with countless bookshelves and skill manuals. As Fang Zhou looked around, he was amazed by the enormous Federation skill repository. Countless bookshelves stretched as far as he could see, making him realize that almost every skill known to mankind could be found there. He then approached a small pedestal and activated the upload function. A purple energy gathered above it as he submitted his newly created skills, Bone Javelin and Bone Shield, to the repository. A system notification soon appeared, informing him that both skills had been successfully registered. As a reward, he received 200 contribution points. Another notification explained that because he was the creator of the new skills, he would permanently receive 50% of the contribution points every time someone exchanged for them in the future. Fang Zhou was pleasantly surprised. He had expected a one-time reward, but he never imagined the skills would continue earning him contribution points. Since entering the skill repository was not easy, Fang Zhou decided not to leave after exchanging only a few skills. Instead, he planned to make the most of this opportunity. He walked through the towering bookshelves until he found the skeleton meditation technique. Smiling, he picked up the book and decided to use it as a blueprint to deduce even more powerful necromancer skills. At that moment, green soul energy surrounded him, and the system announced that he had 100 soul power available for skill deduction. Fang Zhou activated the deduction system and a notification appeared in front of him. It informed him that the skeleton meditation method could be upgraded by consuming soul power. Without any hesitation, he chose yes. The moment he confirmed the upgrade, a terrifying aura of death erupted around him. The surrounding green energy grew stronger and stronger, making even Fang Zhou feel shocked by its overwhelming power. In the next moment, the world around him changed. He found himself standing before a majestic skeleton king sitting on a massive throne. A system notification appeared, confirming that the skeleton meditation method had been successfully upgraded. The skeleton king slowly reached out and handed Fang Zhou an ancient black book covered with mysterious golden patterns. Fang Zhou looked at it in surprise, wondering if the book was meant for him. As he accepted the ancient book suddenly floated into the air, and countless glowing runes poured out of its pages. They surrounded Fang Zhou and flowed into his body one after another. As the mysterious energy merged with him, he felt the power of the Skeleton King's inheritance completely fuse with his mind. A moment later, the system announced that the skeleton meditation method had successfully evolved into the Skeleton Monarch meditation method. Fang Zhou quickly checked the new skill's effects. He discovered that the upgraded meditation method doubled his meditation speed and also strengthened all undead-type skills. He clenched his fist in excitement, realizing that the soul power he had spent had been completely worth it. However, he also understood that no matter how powerful a skill became, it still required enough spirit power to use. He remembered that during his previous battle with Ye Fan, his spirit power had almost been completely exhausted. Fortunately, Fang Zhou still had plenty of contribution points left. He decided to exchange them for a skill that could increase his spirit power. After searching through the skill repository, he chose a skill called Presence of Mind. He spent 20 contribution points, and the exchange was completed successfully. Fang Zhou carefully read the description of Presence of Mind. He learned that the skill could passively increase a spellcaster's spirit power recovery speed. It also had an active effect that could instantly restore a portion of spirit power during battle. Although the skill was known to be extremely difficult to learn, Fang Zhou was not worried. Thanks to his special ability, he could master it much more easily than anyone else. The system immediately detected the learnable skill and asked if he wanted to spend 10 soul power to instantly reach the entry stage. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou chose yes. The book opened on its own as streams of blue energy and glowing runes surrounded Fang Zhou. Moments later, the system announced that Presence of Mind had successfully reached the entry stage. Fang Zhou smiled in satisfaction as he felt the results immediately. His spirit power recovered much faster than before. He was pleased with the improvement and believed that if he fought Ye Fan again, he could overwhelm him with an endless army of skeletons before running out of spirit power. Thinking ahead, Fang Zhou decided to prepare for future upgrades as well. He exchanged 60 contribution points for several new skills, including Vine Entanglement, Swamp Spell, Earthwall Spell, Spiderweb Spell, and Ray of Enfeeblement. He planned to study these skills first, and later use them as references to create even stronger abilities. However, Fang Zhou knew that learning powerful skills alone was not enough. To bring out their full potential, he also needed equipment that matched his current strength. Since he was still an F-grade lower apprentice, he could only use gray-white grade equipment. Without wasting any time, he spent 40 contribution points to exchange for a complete beginner equipment set. After putting on the equipment, the system displayed the effects of each item. The Apprentice Mage Hat slightly increased his maximum spirit power. The Apprentice Necklace slightly increased his spirit power recovery speed. The 2 Apprentice Rings slightly reduced the cooldown time of his skills. As soon as Fang Zhou equipped all 4 items, another system notification appeared. The Mage Apprentice 4-piece set activated, increasing his cultivation speed and skill proficiency improvement speed by 10%. Fang Zhou smiled with satisfaction. He realized that this set would allow him to improve his skills even faster than before. He then checked his updated status panel, which showed all of his current attributes, equipment, and mastered skills, including Skeleton Monarch Meditation Method, Summon Skeleton, Bone Javelin, Bone Shield, and Presence of Mind. Looking at everything he had gained, Fang Zhou was extremely pleased. He felt that this visit had been incredibly rewarding, and praised the Federation's skill repository as a truly extraordinary place. After checking his new equipment and skills, Fang Zhou was about to leave. But suddenly, his skeleton clone appeared right in front of him. As the skeleton clone appeared before him, Fang Zhou realized that he had almost forgotten something important. His skeleton clone also needed the proper combat skills to become stronger. He quickly searched through the skill repository and decided that weapon mastery, block, and battle cry were 3 essential skills for the skeleton clone. Without hesitation, he spent 30 contribution points to exchange for all 3 skills. As he looked at his remaining contribution points, Fang Zhou smiled helplessly. He admitted that although the skill repository was an incredible place, learning new skills consumed contribution points at an alarming rate. Thinking back, he joked to himself that he wished he could find another excellent sparring partner like Yi Fen in the future to earn more contribution points. Soon after, Fang Zhou left the skill repository and returned to the Demon Hunter Research Association. Instructor Liu asked if he had learned any new skills during his visit. Fang Zhou smiled and replied that this trip had been extremely rewarding and that he had gained far more than he expected. Just then, before the conversation could continue, Ye Fan suddenly shouted his name, declaring that he refused to accept the outcome. Ye Fan threw a spirit power recovery potion toward Fang Zhou and told him to drink it. He admitted that he still did not understand Fang Zhou's tactics from their previous battle, but this time he was determined to defeat him as quickly as possible. Fang Zhou caught the potion and smiled. He calmly asked if Ye Fan was really sure he wanted to challenge him now, especially since he had just upgraded his skills. Ye Fan clenched his fists and declared that he refused to spend his entire life living in someone else's shadow. He vowed to use all of his strength to defeat Fang Zhou in this rematch. Fang Zhou reminded Ye Fan that this duel would count as extra training. Because of that, Ye Fan would have to pay additional contribution points. Standing nearby, Professor Chen said that if Ye Fan agreed, it would not matter because Ye Fan would be the one paying the cost anyway. Hearing that, Fang Zhou accepted the challenge without hesitation. He tossed the recovery potion back to Ye Fan and told him to keep it because he might need it after the fight. Hearing those words, Ye Fan became even more furious. He shouted Fang Zhou's name in anger and immediately activated his power. Green energy burst out around him as he jumped into the air to launch his Skyfall strike. Watching the duel, Bai Xiaochan was shocked that Ye Fan had used his strongest move right at the beginning of the fight. Instructor Liu told her that Ye Fan's combat instincts were excellent because he understood that ending the battle quickly was his only chance of defeating Fang Zhou. Facing the incoming attack, Fang Zhou calmly raised his hand. Everyone watched closely, wondering how he would respond now that he had learned several new skills. A massive magic circle suddenly appeared beneath Fang Zhou's feet. Green energy swirled around him as he activated a powerful summoning spell. Bai Xiaochan stared at the scene in surprise. She wondered if Fang Zhou was simply using Summon Skeleton again, but Instructor Liu immediately shook his head and said no. He could tell that this spell was completely different from the ordinary Summon Skeleton skill. A moment later, Fang Zhou was completely surrounded by the summoned skeletons. The green magic circle released an enormous wave of undead energy as countless skeletons climbed out one after another. Seeing such a huge army appear at once, everyone was stunned. They felt that something was completely wrong because no ordinary summon skeleton skill could create so many skeletons. At that moment, Ye Fan's powerful attack crashed into the battlefield with a massive explosion. The blast shook the entire arena and sent debris flying everywhere. Watching the explosion, Instructor Liu was shocked, saying that Ye Fan's attack was now much stronger than before. Even Professor Chen was shocked, realizing that Ye Fan had somehow comprehended and upgraded his ultimate skill during their previous battle. When the dust settled, Fang Zhou calmly appeared in front of Ye Fan without a scratch. He praised Ye Fan, saying the attack was much stronger than before. However, while smiling, he turned and added that it was unfortunate because his own skills had also become stronger, only a tiny bit better. Behind him, the endless army of skeletons surrounded Ye Fan from every direction. Ye Fan's confident expression instantly disappeared. As he looked around and saw countless skeleton warriors closing in, he finally realized that he had fallen into Fang Zhou's trap. Ye Fan was quickly overwhelmed by Fang Zhou's skeleton army. As the skeletons surrounded him, they repeatedly punched and kicked him. Ye Fan desperately shouted at them not to hit his face, but the skeletons completely ignored his plea and continued beating him until he collapsed. Fang Zhou walked up to Professor Chen and said that the sparring match was over. Professor Chen agreed, saying that after such a beating, Ye Fan probably would not be able to train for at least a week. As Fang Zhou prepared to leave, Professor Chen stopped him and asked if he was really not interested in establishing a Necromancer Research Association. Fang Zhou smiled and politely refused once again. Fang Zhou thought to himself that allowing researchers to study his skills too closely might expose the existence of his system. He believed that would bring him endless trouble, so he decided it was safer to keep his abilities a secret. Meanwhile, inside the skill repository, a beautiful woman noticed an unusual notification. She was surprised to discover that a necromancer had successfully registered a brand new skill. Curious about this unexpected discovery, she immediately checked the newly added necromancer technique. Inside the skill repository, Su Xinyan spent 20 contribution points and successfully exchanged them for the newly registered necromancer skill. As she carefully read through the skill book, she saw familiar spells such as Bone Javelin and Bone Shield, but she quickly realized that the creator had used them in completely new ways. Amazed by the creativity behind the techniques, she praised the developer as a true genius. Excited by the discovery, Su Xinyan immediately decided to report the news to her father. Meanwhile, in Principal Su Tianquo's office, Teacher Lu visited again. He firmly requested that Fang Zhou be added to the seed list once more. Professor Chen also supported the request, saying that he could personally vouch for Fang Zhou's talent. However, Principal Su Tianquo looked at them helplessly and asked why Professor Chen was joining Teacher Lu in making such an unreasonable request. He explained that even if a necromancer performed well now, the class lacked enough high-level skills for future growth, making it difficult to justify placing Fang Zhou on the seed list. However, Professor Chen argued that Fang Zhou had already comprehended 2 necromancer skills entirely on his own. Hearing that, Principal Su Tianquo was stunned, but even then, he remained unconvinced. He replied that creating new skills alone was not enough. What truly mattered was whether those skills were powerful and useful in actual combat. Just as Teacher Lu was about to continue speaking about the skill's strength, Su Xinyan hurried into the office. Excitedly, she announced that 2 brand new necromancer skills had appeared in the skill repository. Hearing that, Principal Su Tianquo was stunned. He immediately asked if they were really necromancer skills. Su Xinyan nodded and demonstrated the 2 skills she had just obtained. Although she had only studied them briefly and had not fully mastered them yet, she confidently said that their effects were incredible. After seeing the demonstration, Principal Su Tianquo was left speechless. Su Xinyan then asked her father if he knew who had developed those remarkable necromancer skills. Caught off guard by the question, Su Tianquo hesitated, unsure of how to answer. Excited, Su Xinyan immediately declared that she wanted to take that person as her master. However, her father gently told her that it was impossible. Confused, Su Xinyan asked why. He explained that the creator of those skills was still just a student. Meanwhile, Fang Zhou sat quietly in the classroom, calmly cultivating and meditating. At that moment, Ye Fan suddenly called out to him again, loudly challenging his rival to another fight. The other students looked over in surprise, wondering if he was challenging Fang Zhou yet again. Fang Zhou slowly opened his eyes and calmly asked Ye Fan how many times he had already challenged him. He told Ye Fan that instead of repeatedly asking for duels, he should spend more time cultivating and improving himself. Ye Fan grinned confidently and replied that this time would be different, making Fang Zhou curious about what he meant. Ye Fan proudly told Fang Zhou that his strength had improved tremendously over the past few days. With Bai Xiaochan's help, he was confident that he could finally defeat Fang Zhou. Embarrassed, Bai Xiaochan quickly explained that Ye Fan had been the one who knelt in public and begged for her help. She had only agreed to prevent people from misunderstanding the situation. Curious, Fan Zhou asked how she had managed to help Ye Fan become stronger. Bai Xiaochan explained that a few days earlier while she was sleeping, she had comprehended a support skill called Lullaby. The skill could speed up spirit power recovery while also greatly improving the effects of meditation and training. However, she added that the skill could only be used 3 times each day. Ye Fan revealed that he had to spend 2 contribution points every week just to exchange for the opportunity to use it. Hearing that, Fang Zhou silently wondered if Ye Fan planned to spend his entire life paying off contribution point debts just to keep using the skill. Even so, Ye Fan remained completely confident. He leaned toward Fan Zhou and boldly declared that this time he was certain he would win. Instead of responding immediately, Fan Zhou began thinking about Bai Xiaochan's support skill. Since it could improve the effects of meditation and training, he wondered if it would also enhance the cultivation and growth of his skeleton clone. Realizing how useful Bai Xiaochan's lullaby skill could be, Fang Zhou immediately asked if she was willing to sell him her remaining uses of the skill for the day. Bai Xiaochan hesitated for a moment before admitting that it was possible. Meanwhile, Ye Fan became annoyed because the 2 of them were completely ignoring his challenge. Without saying another word, Fang Zhou summoned several skeleton warriors. He told Ye Fan to fight the skeletons first, and reminded him to transfer the promised contribution points after the battle was over. Feeling insulted, Ye Fan angrily shouted that Fang Zhou was looking down on him, Ignoring Ye Fan's complaints, Fang Zhou turned to Bai Xiaochan and asked her to use lullaby on him instead. Bai Xiaochan agreed and immediately activated the skill. A soothing melody filled the room as green waves of energy surrounded Fang Zhou, placing him under the effects of lullaby. At the same time, inside the undead realm, Fang Zhou's mind connected to the skeleton clone, who was sitting cross-legged in meditation, quietly cultivating under the blood-red sky. After activating lullaby, Fang Zhou immediately noticed that its effects had reached the skeleton clone inside the undead realm. He was pleased to discover that the support skill could enhance his clone as well. Looking at the skeleton clone's status, Fang Zhou decided that this was the perfect opportunity to test all of its combat skills. Just then, a skeleton warrior appeared. The skeleton warrior immediately charged at Fang Zhou with its massive mace raised high. Seeing that, Fang Zhou quickly activated Bone Spear. A bone spear formed in his hands, coated with powerful energy. As the skeleton warrior attacked, Fang Zhou used his parry block skill to block the skeleton warrior's heavy spiked mace. Immediately after defending, Fang Zhou followed up by using weapon mastery. Its movements became much faster and more precise as it skillfully controlled its weapon. Changing its stance in an instant, it smoothly shifted its body to avoid the skeleton warrior's attack. Without giving the skeleton warrior any time to recover, the skeleton clone unleashed reverse thrust. Its spear shot forward with incredible speed and pierced straight through the skeleton warrior's head, defeating it in a single strike. As the enemy fell, its soul flame flowed into the skeleton clone. A system notification appeared, telling him that his strength had increased by 0.11 and his soul power by 0.55. Fang Zhou was surprised to see that the lullaby skill had increased even the system rewards by 10%. But just then, two giant skeleton warriors charged at Fang Zhou from behind at full speed. Both of the skeleton warriors attacked with their massive swords, destroying the ground. However, the skeleton clone immediately jumped into the air and dodged their attacks. Fang Zhou then grabbed his bone spear tightly and rushed fearlessly at the two giant skeleton warriors. With a powerful swing of his weapon, he pierced their bodies, killing them instantly. Every enemy he defeated rewarded Fang Zhou with more strength and soul power, and thanks to lullaby, the rewards were even greater than before. After cutting down those two skeleton warriors, Fang Zhou looked into the distance and noticed that an entire undead legion was still waiting. Instead of feeling intimidated, he challenged them all at once and activated Battle Cry. A thunderous roar echoed across the undead realm, greatly increasing his strength, constitution, and agility for a limited time. Empowered by the skill, the skeleton clone charged straight into the massive army. It fought through countless skeletons with overwhelming momentum, defeating enemies one after another. With every skeleton that fell, Fang Zhou's strength and soul power continued to increase, allowing him to grow stronger. Fang Zhou continued fighting without slowing down. As more skeletons fell, he used Battle Cry again and shouted that he could still become even stronger. Every enemy he defeated increased Fang Zhou's strength and soul power, allowing him to grow stronger at an incredible rate. While battling, Fang Zhou suddenly noticed something unusual. He stopped and looked into the distance, where the bones of the skeletons he had killed were flying into the air. Confused, he looked up and saw something very shocking. All those bones started to form a powerful undead warrior. A brilliant light surrounded the undead warrior as its body transformed. Huge wings spread from its back, and it held a massive sword in its hand. It was a bone angel. Fang Zhou was stunned when he saw the bone angel. He could not believe that a boss had appeared directly inside the beginner village. The bone angel slowly raised its massive sword high into the air. Its overwhelming aura spread across the battlefield as it prepared to deliver a devastating attack. The skeleton clone immediately sensed the danger, jumped to the side, and dodged its attack. It realized that if the bone angel's attack landed, it would die instantly. Since defending against such a powerful strike was impossible, it decided that the only chance of survival was to attack first. Without hesitation, the skeleton clone jumped onto the bone angel's arm and charged at it. The skeleton clone activated Battle Cry. A powerful roar echoed across the battlefield, boosting its physical abilities. It then unleashed Bone Spear with all its strength, determined to strike the bone angel before it could launch its deadly attack. The skeleton clone's shield-breaking stance struck the bone angel's body with full force, weakening its defenses. Without giving the bone angel a chance to recover, it immediately followed up with brutal strike, unleashing a series of powerful attacks that landed one after another on the bone angel's arm. It was arm-swinging stance that completely broke one of the bone angel's arms. The skeleton clone then immediately backed off as the bone angel moved. It wondered what the Bone Angel was trying to do. Then, to its surprise, the Bone Angel broke off its injured arm and threw it aside. Fang Zhou was stunned to see the Bone Angel so decisive, but the next second, the Bone Angel charged at the skeleton clone at full speed. Seeing that, the skeleton clone quickly activated Parry Block to block the Bone Angel's sword, but the Bone Angel's attack was so powerful that it sliced even Rocky Mountain in two. The skeleton clone's Parry Block deflected the attack just enough to prevent a direct hit, but the impact was still powerful enough to send the skeleton clone flying backward. It hit the wall behind with a massive shockwave, making the skeleton clone cough as it struggled to regain its balance. The Bone Angel slowly approached with its remaining arm still gripping its sword. Looking at the shattered arm, the skeleton clone realized that destroying it earlier had saved its life. If both of the Bone Angel's arms had been intact, that attack would have smashed every bone in its body. However, as the Bone Angel continued walking toward it, Fang Zhou saw something. He realized that the Bone Angel's weakness had finally been exposed. The blue flame on its damaged arm was the key to defeating the boss. However, before the skeleton clone could make another move, the Bone Angel suddenly lowered its stance. Watching this, the skeleton clone wondered what the boss was planning. The next moment, the Bone Angel began spinning at an incredible speed. A powerful whirlwind formed around its body, tearing through the battlefield and sending rocks flying in every direction. Seeing the massive tornado rushing toward him, the skeleton clone immediately realized that the situation had become dangerous. The next second, the Bone Angel rushed in and attacked with even greater power, destroying the place where the skeleton clone had been standing. However, the skeleton clone moved at the right time and dodged its attack. Seeing the power of the Bone Angel's attack, Fang Zhou realized that it was using the force of its spinning to make up for the strength it had lost after one of its arms was destroyed. He also understood that while the Bone Angel was spinning, its weakness could no longer be targeted. The next moment, the Bone Angel started spinning again and charged at him. Seeing that, the skeleton clone realized that the Bone Angel was still targeting him. It could not understand why the boss was so determined to defeat it. As the spinning Bone Angel chased after it, the skeleton clone kept retreating. Before long, it found itself trapped in a dead end with nowhere left to escape. Seeing that there was no way out, the skeleton clone knew it had no choice but to risk everything. Even the powerful wind created by the Bone Angel's spinning attack was enough to scrape away bones and tear through flesh, making a direct confrontation extremely dangerous. Instead of panicking, the skeleton clone calmed itself and carefully observed the Bone Angel's movements. It focused on finding even the smallest opening, while enduring the relentless assault. After watching closely for a moment, the skeleton clone finally noticed a brief gap in the Bone Angel's spinning attack. Realizing that this was its only chance, the skeleton clone instantly charged through the small opening it had discovered. Gathering all of its strength, it thrust its bone spear straight toward the Bone Angel. But before the skeleton clone's attack could land, the Bone Angel backed away and dodged it. Seeing that, Fang Zhou mocked the Bone Angel, saying that such a huge creature actually had weak bones and should go back and get more calcium. As the Bone Angel attacked, the skeleton clone noticed that the blue soulfire core inside its chest had become completely exposed. Realizing this was the opportunity it had been waiting for, it did not hesitate any longer. The skeleton clone immediately activated Bone Javelin and hurled the glowing spear directly at the exposed soulfire core with all its strength. The Bone Angel's eyes widened as it saw the skeleton clone's spear coming. However, just before it could hit the exposed soulfire core, the Bone Angel quickly spread one of its massive wings and blocked the attack. The Bone Javelin failed to reach its target and returned to the skeleton clone. Seeing that, the skeleton clone said that, as expected, the Bone Angel's enormous wings were not just for decoration. They were powerful enough to protect its vital points. But the skeleton clone remained calm. It declared that its system was not just for show either. At that moment, the system began combining the web spell and skeletal armament skills. A notification soon appeared, announcing that the new skill Bone Shackles had been successfully deduced. The skill allowed the user to condense undead mana into strong bone chains that could bind enemies and make it difficult for them to move or fight. The strength of the chains, their duration, and their casting range all depended on the user's spirit attribute and skill proficiency. Seeing the successful result, the skeleton clone smiled with satisfaction. Everything had happened exactly as it had predicted. It knew that skill deduction could combine the characteristics of different professional skills and transform them into even more powerful undead abilities. The skeleton clone looked up at the Bone Angel and calmly remarked that it seemed to enjoy flying. The next moment, it activated Bone Shackles. Thick chains made from undead mana shot through the air and instantly wrapped around the Bone Angel's body. Caught completely off guard, the Bone Angel widened its eyes in shock as the chains tightly bound its wings and limbs. The skeleton clone extended its hand and tightened its grip on the chains. Then, with a cold command, it pulled down with all its strength. The Bone Angel was dragged out of the sky as the heavy chains forced it toward the ground. No matter how hard it struggled, it could not break free. Watching the trapped Bone Angel, the skeleton clone warned it not to resist, saying that the more the Bone Angel struggled, the more excited it became. Saying that, the skeleton clone jumped onto the Bone Angel's head. With a powerful strike, the skeleton clone slammed its spear down, splitting its head into two with a huge explosion. As the dust settled, it noticed the Bone Angel's blue soul fire drifting out of its broken body. Without hesitation, the skeleton clone reached out and gladly absorbed the soul fire into itself. Immediately, a system notification appeared, informing it that its soul power had increased by 100. Although the skeleton clone was pleased with the huge increase in soul power, it was confused because its body had not become any stronger. The system then explained that its basic attributes had already reached the maximum limit for its race. To grow any further, it would have to consume soul power and begin its race evolution. After reading the notification, the skeleton clone finally understood the reason. It realized that it could no longer increase its attributes because it had already reached the racial limit. From now on, evolving into a higher race would be the only way to become stronger. After defeating the Bone Angel, the skeleton clone looked toward the sky and wondered what existed beyond it. It wanted to become stronger so that it could find the answer for itself. A system prompt then appeared, informing it that its current race was apprentice-level skeleton. It could evolve into a black iron-level skeleton warrior by consuming 100 soul power. The system asked whether it wanted to begin the evolution. Without any hesitation, the skeleton clone chose yes. Dark, undead energy immediately gathered around its body, wrapping it in a cocoon of black and green flames. Feeling the powerful energy surrounding it, the skeleton clone declared that its path of evolution had finally begun. Fang Zhou's skeleton clone's race evolution was now in progress. As the evolution continued, a mysterious voice echoed in the skeleton clone's mind. It declared that the path of death was the path of slaughter, and the path of slaughter was the path of evolution. The overwhelming power flowing through its body made the skeleton clone groan in pain. A moment later, the evolution was completed successfully. The skeleton clone had officially evolved into a bone warrior. Its body had become much stronger, and all four of its basic attributes, strength, constitution, agility, and spirit, had increased by 30 points. The skeleton clone was pleasantly surprised when the system announced that it had also awakened a new racial talent called Bone Monarch. Curious, it checked the skill's description. The system explained that Bone Monarch was a rare blessing granted only to the strongest members of the skeleton race. The talent slightly increased the damage dealt by skeletons and their evolved forms, while also slightly reducing the damage they received. After reading the description, the skeleton clone nodded in satisfaction. It realized that the talent was specially designed to strengthen skeleton-type undead, allowing it to defeat monsters more efficiently and level up faster in the undead realm. Meanwhile, an ordinary skeleton quietly walked toward it from behind. The ordinary skeleton suddenly rushed toward the newly evolved Bone Warrior and raised its bone club to attack. Hearing the movement, the Bone Warrior turned around in confusion just as the skeleton's weapon struck its head. The Bone Warrior barely reacted. The attack felt much weaker than before. Seeing this, he realized that from now on, the weakest skeletons would no longer pose any threat to him. Just then, another system notification appeared. It informed him that after evolving, his racial talent had also improved. He could now upgrade his skeletal armament and unlock new equipment. Without any hesitation, the Bone Warrior chose to upgrade it. Blue energy instantly surrounded his body, as his skeletal armor transformed. Moments later, the system announced that the upgrade was complete and that he had successfully unlocked a new piece of equipment called Bone Armor. After putting on the newly upgraded Bone Armor, Fang Zhou felt it completely merge with his body. The armor was formed from condensed bone essence and slightly increased his overall defense. As soon as it fused with him, he could clearly feel that his strength had grown much greater. Wanting to test his new abilities, Fang Zhou looked at a nearby skeleton and apologized in advance, saying that he would use it for some practice. The confused skeleton could only make strange sounds as it stared at him. Without wasting any time, Fang Zhou rushed forward and threw a powerful punch. The terrified skeleton quickly raised both hands to protect its head, but a second later, nothing happened to it. Confused, it looked toward Fang Zhou in confusion. But at that moment, Fang Zhou's powerful punch landed. Its body smashed into the ground, breaking apart as bones scattered in every direction. Fang Zhou calmly walked forward and said that he was sorry to disappoint it because he had not used his full strength. He explained that he had only thrown a casual punch to test his new power. After seeing the result, Fang Zhou realized that when bone armor was combined with the Bone Monarch talent, the damage he dealt against skeletons had increased dramatically. A system notification appeared, showing that his strength had increased by 0.011 and his soul power by 0.055. Although he was satisfied with the gains, Fang Zhou knew that defeating weak skeletons no longer helped him improve much. He decided that if he wanted to grow stronger, he would have to venture deeper into the undead realm, where more powerful enemies lived. Just as he was preparing to leave, Fang Zhou suddenly felt a headache and stopped. He sat down on the ground and grabbed his head, realizing that fighting the boss took up too much time and his spirit was very low. Fang Zhou then ended his meditation and returned to the real world. As soon as he opened his eyes, he was breathing heavily, and a trail of blood ran down the side of his face. Seeing his condition, Bai Xiaochan quickly rushed over to support him. Worried, she asked if he was all right because he had suddenly been injured while meditating. Fang Zhou immediately realized that the wound he had suffered during the battle in the undead realm had somehow affected his real body. He silently reminded himself that the injury had come from the boss fight, and that he could not afford to be so careless again in the future. Not wanting Bai Xiaochan to worry, Fang Zhou calmly told her that he was fine. He explained that he had simply encountered a small accident while meditating. Bai Xiaochan was still concerned, and wanted to say something, but before she could continue, someone suddenly called out Fang Zhou's name. Hearing the voice, Fang Zhou turned his head and looked that way. It was Ye Fan. He glared at Fang Zhou and declared that the skeletons Fang Zhou had summoned could no longer hold him back. Green energy surrounded his body as he confidently challenged Fang Zhou to fight him fairly without relying on his undead summons. Fang Zhou remained completely calm. Instead of accepting the challenge, he raised one hand and activated his newly created skill, Bone Shackles. Dozens of glowing bone chains shot through the air and instantly wrapped around Ye Fan's body, binding his arms, legs, and body before he could react. Ye Fan struggled desperately and shouted in frustration. He complained that it was unfair because Fang Zhou had used a skill he had never seen before. He demanded a rematch. Fang Zhou ignored the complaint and told Ye Fan to come back and challenge him again after he had earned enough contribution points to pay for another lesson. Everyone who witnessed the fight was shocked. They admitted that they had never seen a skill like Bone Shackles before. Some of them wondered if Fang Zhou had actually created the skill himself. Meanwhile, Ye Fan, who was still tightly bound by the glowing bone chains, angrily shouted at the others to stop staring and help him break free. Bai Xiaochan watched Fang Zhou walk away and couldn't help wondering just how powerful he really was. Ignoring everyone's reactions, Fang Zhou calmly left the classroom. As he walked down the stairs, he checked the time on his phone and realized that it was already Friday. Seeing that, he thought that time had passed too fast. He remembered that ever since awakening his class, he had been completely focused on becoming stronger. Because of that, he had not gone home to visit his family for a long time. With that thought in mind, Fang Zhou headed toward the Resource Exchange Department. When Fang Zhou arrived at the Resource Exchange Department, a receptionist noticed him and politely asked if he needed any help. Fang Zhou nodded and requested to exchange 10 contribution points for 100,000 Longsha currency. The receptionist was surprised and reminded him that contribution points were very difficult to earn. She asked if it was really worth exchanging such valuable points for money. Fang Zhou calmly replied that it was fine because he urgently needed the money. Seeing that he had already made up his mind, the receptionist completed the exchange and handed him the cash. She told him that if he ever needed to exchange anything else in the future, he was welcome to come back. Fang Zhou thanked her before taking the bag of money. Holding the briefcase, Fang Zhou smiled to himself. He believed that with this money, the people he cared about would finally be able to live a slightly better life. Soon after, he arrived at Yunduo Orphanage. The peaceful orphanage was full of children happily running around and playing with one another. A caretaker reminded them to be careful and not to run too fast, while the children laughed and challenged each other to a game of chase. Watching the lively scene, the caretaker smiled warmly and remarked that the children were full of energy. She then wondered how many of them would successfully awaken their talents in the future. Just then, Fang Zhou arrived and called out, "Sister Roro." The caretaker turned around after hearing someone call her name. When she saw Fang Zhou standing there with a smile, carrying a briefcase and a large bag, her face lit up with surprise. Fang Zhou smiled back and told her that he had returned. The children immediately recognized him and ran toward him excitedly. They happily shouted that Brother Zhou was back and eagerly asked whether he had brought them anything delicious. One child tried to push through the crowd to get a better look, while another jokingly complained that no one was paying attention to him. Sister Roja laughed and gently scolded the children for thinking about food the moment Fang Zhou arrived. Fang Zhou smiled warmly and reassured them that there was enough food for everyone. After the children settled down, Sister Roro hesitated for a moment before asking about Fang Zhou's awakening test. She quietly wondered what his result had been. Fang Zhou calmly told her that his awakening had been successful and that he had awakened as a necromancer. Hearing that, Sister Roro became overjoyed. She happily congratulated him and said that the most important thing was that his awakening had succeeded. The nearby children overheard their conversation. One child looked surprised and said that a necromancer sounded scary, but another became excited instead. He thought summoning skeletons sounded amazing and declared that he wanted to become a necromancer too. Hearing that, Fang Zhou smiled and summoned 2 small weakened skeletons. The tiny skeletons looked harmless and adorable, making the children burst into laughter instead of feeling afraid. The children quickly gathered around the little skeletons and began playing with them. One excitedly shouted that it was a skeleton and suggested tossing its head around. Another happily reached for the tiny skeleton, saying it looked so fun, and asking for its head. The little skeletons obediently let the children play with them. After seeing the children having fun, Fang Zhou handed his briefcase to Sister Roro. He explained that it was for the orphanage's director. Confused, Sister Roro accepted the briefcase and wondered what was inside. Just then, a strange voice interrupted them. It mockingly commented that the scene was truly heartwarming. Fang Zhou and Sister Roro immediately turned toward the source of the voice. A muscular man wearing a thick gold chain slowly walked into the orphanage with several people behind him. A smug smile spread across his face as he asked if his appearance had disturbed them. At Yunduo Orphanage, a large group of unfamiliar people suddenly gathered outside. Zhou Fang looked at them and wondered who they were. He could immediately tell that they had not come with good intentions. Rose stepped forward and confronted the men, asking why they had come when they had already agreed that she could repay the money in a few days. Hearing this, the leader of the group became angry. He mocked her words and demanded to know how she dared delay a payment owed to the Tiger Claw gang. Without warning, the man struck Rauro and knocked her to the ground. He angrily reminded her that today was the final deadline. If she failed to repay the money, the orphanage land that had been used as collateral would belong to the Tiger Claw gang. The gang leader laughed confidently as Roro remained worried. A little girl nearby looked at her with concern and softly called out to Sister Roro. The little girl Xingxing suddenly rushed toward the gang leader and bravely hit him with her head, shouting that the world's #1 troublemaker had arrived. She told the bullies not to hurt Sister Roro. Furious at the child's interference, the gang leader angrily told Xingxing to get out of his way and moved to attack her. Roro immediately panicked and called out Xingxing's name. However, before the gang leader could hurt her, a skeleton suddenly appeared between them and grabbed his leg, stopping him. The leader stumbled backward in shock and stared at the strange skeleton, unable to understand what it was. At that moment, Zhou Fang stood beside Xingxing and placed his hand on her head. He coldly ordered the gang members to apologize, warning them that they would have to bear the consequences if they refused. Seeing Zhou Fang controlling the skeleton, one of the gang members quickly realized what was happening. He whispered to Leader Hu that Zhou Fang was a necromancer. Hearing this, Leader Hu looked at Zhou Fang, then revealed his true strength as the demon mask warrior, Liu Hu. Powerful energy erupted around him as he mocked Zhou Fang, saying that Zhou Fang was only the weakest kind of necromancer. He cut down Zhou Fang's skeleton's head and questioned whether Zhou really believed he had enough strength to stand against them. Seeing this, Zhou realized that Liu Hu was a class holder. However, instead of being intimidated, Zhou turned to Sister Roro and asked who these people really were. Sister Roro explained that they were from the Tiger Claw Training Equipment Company. The children at the orphanage had reached the right age to begin training, so she and the dean had taken out a loan to purchase training equipment in advance because they did not want to delay the children's training. She then explained that the Tiger Claw people appeared to be ordinary merchants who sold professional training equipment, but in reality, they secretly ran a loan-sharking business. Because the interest kept increasing, the orphanage eventually became unable to repay the growing debt. After hearing the whole story, Zhou Fang became upset and asked Sister Ro why she had not told him about such a serious problem sooner. Leader Liu Hu pointed at Zhou and warned him not to interfere in other people's business. He confidently told Zhou Fang that 100,000 Longsha coins was far more money than someone like him could afford. However, Zhou did not argue with him. Instead, he suddenly threw a briefcase toward Liu Hu and calmly told him to take it. Zhou explained that the briefcase contained exactly 100,000 Longsha coins and told Liu Hu to take the money and leave immediately. Sister Roro was shocked when she saw this. She quickly asked Zhou Fang where he had gotten so much money. Leader Liu Hu and his men opened the briefcase to check it. One of them was stunned after seeing the money inside and confirmed that it really contained 100,000 Longsha coins. Liu Hu stared at the money for a moment, but instead of accepting the payment, his expression became serious. He suddenly ordered everyone to shut up and threw the briefcase away. Liu Hu knew that his boss had specifically ordered him to take over the orphanage's land. Compared to getting that valuable land, the 100,000 Longsha coins meant nothing to him. Leader Liu Hu looked at Zhou and mocked him, asking if he really thought Liu Hu cared about such a small amount of money. Zhou Fang reminded him that the debt had already been paid and asked what else he wanted. Leader Liu Hu then revealed his true intentions. He claimed that because the orphanage had been overdue on its payment for too long, they now needed to pay 500,000 Longsha coins instead. Sister Roro was shocked when she heard the ridiculous amount and exclaimed that they were demanding 500,000 coins. Zhou Fang immediately understood what was happening. He said that it looked like Liu Hu and his men had come there only to cause trouble. Leader Liu Hu did not bother denying it. Instead, he laughed arrogantly and admitted that they were indeed there to cause trouble. He insulted the people at the orphanage and said that people like them were not worthy of occupying such valuable land. Leader Liu Hu then ordered his men to attack, declaring that they would take the orphanage's land for themselves that very day. His men eagerly rushed forward, ready to fight. However, Zhou Fang remained completely calm as they charged toward him. Seeing that they planned to overwhelm him with numbers, a slight smile appeared on his face. He then activated his ability and prepared to summon his skeletons. As Zhou Fang summoned his skeletons, blue-green energy suddenly spread throughout the area. Liu Hu's men immediately became nervous when they saw several skeleton warriors appearing in front of them. Zhou Fang ordered all of them to get down on their knees and apologize. He warned them that if they refused, they would have to face the consequences. The skeletons slowly moved toward Liu Hu's men, making them even more frightened. One of the skeletons moved directly toward the blonde-haired man, causing him to sweat nervously. However, Leader Liu Hu jumped and hit one skeleton warrior, shouting that there was nothing to be afraid of because a necromancer was considered the weakest class. He believed that skeletons summoned by a student like Zhou Fang should be so weak that even an ordinary person could easily smash them into pieces. Encouraged by this, Liu Hu's men became confident again. They shouted at each other to drive the skeletons out and ordered everyone to attack. They angrily insulted the people at the orphanage, claiming that unwanted people like them had no right to become class holders. Soon, the entire group rushed toward Zhou and his summoned skeletons, ready to fight. A frightened girl began crying loudly and begged someone to save them. Seeing the attackers continue causing trouble, Zhou Fang became furious. He shouted that they were asking to die and immediately ordered his skeletons to scatter and deal with them. However, the attackers were still confident. They laughed at Zhou Fang, believing that a few piles of bones could never stop them. They surrounded the skeletons with weapons in their hands and told each other to teach Zhou Fang a lesson. One of the men raised a large spiked club and rushed toward a skeleton, shouting that it should just die. He swung the weapon down with all his strength, expecting to smash the skeleton apart. But before his attack could succeed, the skeleton reacted with incredible speed. It counterattacked instantly, cutting off both of the man's hands and sending him flying through the air. The situation immediately turned terrifying for the attackers. The man screamed in pain. The others were completely shocked by what they were seeing. They could not understand how Zhou Fang's summoned skeletons could be so powerful. They finally realized that these skeletons were nowhere near as weak as ordinary summoned skeletons were supposed to be. Leader Liu Hu stared at Zhou Fang in disbelief. Zhou Fang still looked like an ordinary student, so he could not understand why the skeletons summoned by him were so powerful. Even so, he refused to believe that a mere necromancer could defeat him. Confident in his own strength, he charged directly toward Zhou Fang with his weapon raised. He activated his bone-shattering strike and prepared to smash Zhou with a powerful blow. Seeing the attack coming, Sister Roro became frightened and desperately shouted at Zhou to get out of the way. However, Zhou Fang remained completely calm. Just before the weapon could hit him, he activated Bone Shield. A powerful barrier appeared in front of him and blocked the bone-shattering strike. Leader Lu Hu froze in shock. He could not believe that his powerful attack had actually been stopped. Before he could recover, Zhou Feng immediately activated bone shackles. Several glowing bone chains shot forward and wrapped tightly around Lu Hu's body, lifting him into the air. Leader Lu Hu looked down in confusion, unable to understand what Zhou had just done to him. Zhou Feng tightened the bone shackles and violently slammed Lu Hu into the ground. The powerful impact shattered the ground beneath him, leaving him badly hurt. He coughed in pain as the glowing bone chains continued to hold him tightly. Furious and humiliated, Leader Lu Hu cursed at Zhou and threatened to kill him. However, before he could do anything, several powerful skeletons surrounded him. Their weapons crossed around his body, leaving him completely trapped with nowhere to escape. Zhou Feng stood over Leader Lu Hu with a cold expression. He ordered him to get on his knees and apologize. He made it clear that if he refused to apologize, he would have to face the consequences.